The Ghost and Mrs. Muir will not be presented tonight so that we may bring you the following special program.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners.
His paintings redefined comic book heroes. His vision inspired a generation. The Legend of Kingdom Come is the definitive documentary on Alex Ross, known as the Norman Rockwell of comics.
It almost looked like Renaissance paintings, except for superheroes.
He makes them look like Olympian gods.
We go behind the scenes of his definitive graphic novel, Kingdom Come, now on Blu-ray, packed with exclusive interviews and unseen artwork. Order today at legendofkingdomcome.com.
If you're here at Word Balloon, it's because you like comics, creators, conversation, pop culture subjects. Would you consider joining the League of Word Balloon Listeners? Patreon.com/wordballoon. For just $3 a month or more, you'll get exclusive access to the Word Balloon e-magazine, featuring transcriptions of some of my best conversations. When you subscribe, you'll also be part of the Word Balloon Book Club, where Brian Michael Bendis and I will pick a comic every month to review and discuss live with the League on this show. Join the League today, patreon.com/wordballoon. Thank you always for your support, League of Word Balloon listeners. Diana Schutz, welcome back to Word Balloon. I'm so glad to talk to you today, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you, John. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. I'm going to go back. We got to do the origin story. What, as a kid, what got you into comics?
Supergirl, of course. Comics were everywhere when I was growing up. So I'm 9 years ahead of you, I think. And yeah, unlike today, you didn't have to go seek out your comics. They were in every mom and pop corner store in the neighborhood. And they were bright, colorful things. And I was a reader. And they were really cheap, 10 and 12 cents back then. So, for $1, my mother could get me out of her hair for the afternoon kind of thing. And Supergirl was my jam for sure. The Mort Weisinger edited Superman family books, they were targeted. They were so dumb. I try reading them now, and they are pretty dumb. And but for a 5-year-old kid, they were just perfect. And Weisinger, he had me in mind when he was putting together these comics and hiring writers and artists. He was not trying to appeal to an older, sophisticated crowd. He was emphatically not doing what Stan was doing at Marvel. But he had my number. So that was it for me. Yeah.
I see behind you, is that a Lois Lane splash page?
It's a cover, actually.
Oh, it's a cover.
Kurt Schaffenberger original art. In fact, it was a gift from artist Richard Howell. But the art, in those days, they shredded the art. The artists did not get their art back. Or they got maybe a few pieces if they went out of their way to ask for it, especially DC and Marvel and every publisher in those years considered that when they bought the reproduction rights to your artwork, they also bought the artwork, and that the artists did not have the right to what they had drawn. And so anyway, it was the cover was not in great shape. The logo had fallen off. There was a big batch of, just yellow leftover paste up glue. And Tom Orzechowski, I brought the art to Tom Orzechowski and I asked him if he would redo the the logo and one of the balloons had dropped off, and he did a perfect job. Yeah, working from the comic and just matched it, yeah, stroke for stroke, letter for letter. It
God,
was, yeah, amazing. So,
that's incredible. And I know people currently that not only correct original art but also original comics themselves, obviously.
mhm,
And
mhm,
the amount of detail now that it really is another industry within the collector market of
sure.
restoring
Hmm.
pages and covers and
Hmm.
God, I mean, it never even occurred to me, but I know they will even like press it almost like an iron and flatten
Oh
out the
yeah,
wrinkles and I
yeah,
mean, it's insane.
yeah.
I had no idea that now they're beyond knowing artists that could do it, that now there is this other
It's a
industry where
whole
people are
other
doing it.
yeah, a whole other industry. And for people who collect art, for instance, I guess there are some diehards who like don't don't want anything restored because that somehow, I don't know, lessens the authenticity, or yeah, I'm not sure. But but that cover was really beautiful, and the whole top was just yellow, you know, sticky
Gunk.
stuff.
Yeah.
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 And so restoring it was absolutely the way to go. And Tom just, yeah, what a fantastic job.
That's excellent. And I'm going to continue to talk about your past, but I know currently you're working on in an editorial capacity artist editions of you were telling me this one publisher that is taking a foreign comic strip and presenting it in the oversized kind of artist edition style.
Well, um, the details aren't quite that.
Okay.
He's actually published two of those gallery edition style books, collecting a British cartoonist named David Wright. So this is Slingsby Brothers, and a new publisher, relatively new publisher, and they're art collectors. The fellow I'm working with is named Chris Kilaki, and he has two other partners, and they're comics lovers like us. Um, but they are also very specifically collectors of comics art. And they've gotten into that. They got into that in a big way. And during COVID, with everyone stuck at home during lockdown, they thought, well, what the hell? We have these originals of the David Wright strip, which was a very popular a strip called Carol Day, an extremely popular strip in Britain that was never published over here because, frankly, a little too sophisticated for us at the time. We're talking late 50s, early 60s, and I'm not an expert on Carol Day by any means, but if you read the strip, it's a very kind of grown-up look at a young single woman arriving in London, and she's had a proper educational background, and now she's in London, which is just about to turn into swinging London. So when she starts, she's in the jazz scene, and as things progress, um, but the men she meets, the affairs she has, that's all pretty above board in terms of what's happening in the strip. And, in the US, it just something like that would not have ever flown, not in those years, right? So anyway, they owned all the originals to at least two complete stories, and so they published two complete books featuring Carol Day, one of which has a cover by Brian Boland, and and anyway, the books are just beautiful. Production values are amazing, and the strips are published at original size, which was quite large. um, anyway, so yeah, the like 200 or 300 page books, uh, giant,
Wow.
giant things, and expensive, like $300 books, I think.
Wow.
But but my God, they really went all out. And it was Gary Groth who put me in touch with Chris because I guess in the process of putting together these Carol Day books, they also got different artists to do Carol Day drawings. So they had a gallery
Wow.
section in the back, and one of the artists who did a Carol Day drawing is a Brazilian artist named Ricardo Leite, and Ricardo presented. I'm going to show you. Ricardo presented to
Please.
them this
Wow.
book, which is actually the French edition of his graphic novel. Um, and so Slingsby Brothers is going to publish this in English. It was published in Brazil, I think, about 10 years ago. Um, it's called In Search of Lost Tintin. So, uh,
Ah,
yeah, a little riff on Marcel Proust. Um, but anyway, In Search of Lost Tintin, and it chronicles Ricardo's kind of love of comics and how he sort of left that path around age 20 and wound up, when you have to make a living. And he was 20 in the 70s. I think he's just about a couple years younger than I am.
okay.
And he and he wound up, there wasn't a huge comics, well, I guess there was some sort of comics industry in Brazil, but it was either tough to get in, or he wanted to get in with the French, with Pilote magazine, or Métal Hurlant in France, and he wasn't making it. His writing wasn't there yet. His art, even in his 20s, was really very accomplished. Um, but eventually back to Brazil, where he began working in graphic design. In his 60s,
Wow.
he decided to fulfill his dream.
That's
He
so
went
great.
to Brussels, he went to the museum in Brussels, the Comics Art Museum in Brussels, and then the Tintin, the Hergé Museum just outside Brussels. And the graphic novel recounts that whole experience. Well, it's autobiographical. It recounts all of this stuff, while at the same time there's a fantasy or allegorical element to it where he meets all the all the cartoonists who have influenced him. So, he and or their strips. So I've just translated a section where he spends 3 or 4 pages with Mobius, which
Sure.
is actually in French pronounced Moebius. Um, and prior to that, he spent about a page with Frank Miller, and a few pages with Little Nemo from In Slumberland, Winsor McKay's
Sure.
amazing strip. So it's a wonderful, whimsical, kind of passionate love letter to comics. And Gary Groth, when speaking with Chris Kalaki, my new publisher, about this book, recommended me to Chris. And so that's when I came on board. I've blown every deadline so far, but but the trains are back running on time, and I anticipate being done in another month or so. End of March, I'll be done. So it's
Well, when
200,
it's
200 pages.
wow. Well, when
Yeah.
it's ready, obviously, I'll and even before that, I'd love to talk to them about the British stuff that they republished and everything. Uh,
Yeah.
but no, that sounds great, and that's great, buddy. Seriously, I was like, I didn't know once you stopped teaching if you were just like, that's enough. And I respect that for anybody older than us that is like, I just want to relax. But of course, no, you're an ambitious person. You always have been. And I'm glad
Well,
that these kind of projects are coming up for you.
but look, you love comics. I love comics. I, I, I- none of us are ever going to relax, I mean, this is what
Yeah.
we do, right?
Yes.
And um, I don't. Chasing deadlines is getting tougher. I got to admit that, but by the same token, I can't really imagine ever giving up on comics altogether. Um, and yeah, it was about a year after I left Dark Horse, and I was teaching, and I had really sort of ramped up the teaching. Um, when a Dark Horse editor, Jimmy Jefferson, approached me about translating a book written and drawn by an old friend of mine named Olivier Vatine. And Olivier had done Star Wars comics for us at Dark Horse. He was a brilliant, brilliant artist. Um, and his book was called New York, uh, 3 volumes, which Dark Horse published in 1 volume. And I worked with my partner on that, Brandon Kander. Brandon grew up in Montreal as I did, and so his French is very good, and we kind of established a rhythm. In this case, the book, like Ricardo's actual book is in Portuguese, Brazilian Portuguese, but because it's already been translated into French, Brandon does the first draft kind of translation, and then I work from that. It, doing, I have the background in comics. So when in the book, when Ricardo meets Frank, suddenly the linguistic rhythms become a little more terse, a little more hard-boiled, or when he's speaking to Mobius, then we're off into dreams and reality and puns, because Mobius was a huge lover of puns and
Oh,
incorporated them into his own. So yeah, Brandon and I have kind of worked out a nice rhythm to our own process with that. It's how we work on Black Sad too, which is uh, originally written in Spanish, but Brandon begins with the French translation, and then I go back in and work with both the Spanish and the French at hand to make sure that when you're translating, you should always really be translating from the language in which it
oh
was
yeah.
written, because it's like broken telephone, right? Every time you translate from a different language, you're just losing that much more. So
I translated a French journalist who interviewed Mike Tyson when he was first in jail, and I did this for Boxing Illustrated, and worked right with the guy, and the guy spoke English and French, and I was brought in to make it more colloquial,
right.
and make it
Hmm.
more readable for an American audience. But that said, I did like hand it back and forth, and I'm like, am I getting what you're trying to convey? Is this okay? I don't want to misrepresent you and what you're trying to say. And it was really interesting. That's been my only experience as far as translation. But I
Hmm.
I have tremendous respect for you and Kelly Sue DeConnick, and the times that she's done Barbarella comics, I know, for example,
Right.
and manga as well.
Yeah.
Japanese translations.
Yeah, I think, Viz does everything in that kind of two-step program where they get a basic, really rough translation, and then they give it to a writer to write. I would say in the world of professional translation, uh, it- translators are expected to do that whole thing, and um, that's why the translator that you want for any project should be a native English speaker and not, it's counterintuitive. And I know when I first began editing the Manara library, it was 2,500 pages of Milo Manara from Italian. And so I thought, well, I'll look for an Italian, someone who speaks Italian. But that's not really, first of all, you don't need someone who speaks anything because it's written translation. So as long as they're able to read and understand the language, that's all that you really need. But what's critical is that your translator has to be able to write well in English, in the target language, in the language in which the text is going to be published, right? So yeah, you don't think of that. I explain it to students sometimes in this way that, you know, if I had a Ukrainian text, oh, you'd think, okay, I'll go to my Ukrainian grandma and ask her to do the translation into English. Problem is, while her Ukrainian was perfect, she didn't speak a fucking word of English, you know? So, and that kind of illustrates the problem exactly. English is the language that we're going to read the work in. So the translator really should be a native English speaker and writer and have control of that language, because you can do exactly what you did, uh, and check with the author to make sure that you are getting the essence of what's necessary to communicate. Or if the author is dead, as in the case of Mobius, I've been translating the Mobius Library, which is a series that I do solo. Brandon, after the first Mobius, the World of Edina that we worked on together, he was like, that's it for him. Not cartoonist, because Mobius is too out in La La Land for him.
Interesting. Sure.
Right. So,
Wow.
and it's true, Mobius is very abstract, and it's a huge challenge. Um, so Brandon just, yeah, one Mobius was enough for him. So I've been doing that solo ever since, but in addition to working with Philip Simon, the editor, I'm working with Mobius's daughter, Nausicaa, and so that feels like a direct link to her father. It's the closest link I'm going to have, certainly. And she's actually been great.
Had you met
So
him though back in the day?
very briefly,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay.
not in a way to not to say that I knew him. No,
Understood. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
yeah.
wanted to ask you about Minara because of the amount of translations you've done. And forgive me, Diana, but I do have to ask because I know that there might be some on the extreme left that find his stuff exploitive and
Oh,
think
sure.
and
I
and and
Yeah,
yeah. So truly, I mean, I can't deny I'm a hetero guy. I like sexy comics. I certainly appreciated what Minara was doing beyond the genius of his art. But how do you quantify Minara?
yeah. I see Manara really as a the contemporary result of centuries of Italian artistic tradition. I mean, go back to the beginning, and it's like naked ladies, naked
Yeah,
ladies.
yeah,
And that's what he does. He does naked ladies. Um, and sometimes I think that he pushes it so hard because it's funny to him. It's funny. People's reactions are absurdly funny to him. And yeah, I'm not like I don't get I don't get the attitude that says, oh, he's doing this as a stroke book. I don't think so. It's just not, that's not what motivates him to do his art. Um, but he is Italian. He grew up in Venice, and he was exposed to the Italian artistic tradition his entire life. And that's what you see, you know. So it, plus take that and add to it um, the European underground movement, which occurred about the same time. You know, they sort of discovered what was happening here with Robert Crumb, and suddenly they took off in Europe as well, right? And so, and Manara, who is 10 years older than I am, I think,
Okay.
was just ripe for that, you know. Yeah, so he was 20 in the 60s, and he went right, those were his first comics, were like Italian underground comics. And our own underground was sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and
Right.
theirs were no different, you know.
Absolutely.
So I see Manara as this combination of those two things. Um, and yeah, I can't, yeah, it's too rigid, I think, and and too uninformed to just classify him as some kind of exploiter of women. I don't. I I mean, yeah, I'll admit he's controversial, and there were some of the stories that we published um, were a little weird, even for me with that attitude. Um, but I don't see him as as I don't know, actively hurtful or anything like that. And like anything else, you know, if you don't like it, you don't have
Yeah,
to read it.
absolutely.
So,
I'm hip.
yeah,
Absolutely. No,
yeah.
and again, yeah, when he did his X-Women or whatever it was for Marvel a
Hmm.
couple of years ago. Yeah, and
Hmm.
again, I mean, I've certainly seen Click and some of the classics, and even, what you guys at Dark Horse were reprinting and
Hmm.
stuff. And yeah, again, just as an observer, I mean, honestly, this is why I really wanted to talk to you, because you've really seen a lot of the various changes just because of, again, your
Because
age.
I'm old.
Well, yeah, and I get, yeah, but that's all right. And I know this is why I'm glad truly. I don't mean to keep name dropping, but when I interviewed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and he was writing those great essays for the Hollywood Reporter during Black Lives Matter and comparing the strife of the '60s to what everyone was dealing with a couple of years ago and continue
Uh-huh.
to, and I'm like, and I'm like, I am glad you're out there because few people have the perspective you do, participating as you did in the '60s and now, and can really come at this with a frame of reference and experience that younger people just don't have just because they are younger and stuff. And it's important to have these voices that can see the changes and everything. And I think that's really important. And especially for comics, where, and this is why I'm really happy that podcasts exist and we're getting more of this. But you were involved with finding out what was happening at the moment when you were working at your store. And then ultimately you started writing Telegraph Wire, which was, I'll let you explain it, a fanzine that you created.
Yeah, well, the Telegraph Wire, as I mentioned earlier when you and I were talking, was a boots on the ground training in editorial. It began as a retailer newsletter. I was working for Comics and Comics, which was then a six-store chain when I started, seven by the time I left,
Okay.
in Northern California. Um, and co-owned, the chain was co-owned by Bud Plant. And I had written to Bud summer of 81. I found myself at loose ends, and I had already spent 3 years working in Vancouver, BC, at a store called the Comic Shop.
Okay.
And so I had lots of experience in comics retail. I wrote to Bud and said, you know, I'd really like to live in California. I'd been to visit and fallen in love with the San Francisco Bay Area. And I knew Bud co-owned all these stores. We had dealt with Bud's distribution company at the comic shop in Vancouver. So yeah, I wrote to him, and much to my surprise, received and it really, John, I wrote to him kind of on a lark, thinking this could never happen. But I got a call from his partner, the late John Barrett, saying, "Yeah, come on down. We got a job for you." And so I hopped in my 1968 Volkswagen and drove from Montreal to Berkeley, and there I was. And within a few months, I didn't just want to work behind the counter, and I was doing lots of stuff at the Berkeley store, getting all their back issues together. In those days, comics retail was all about the back issue market. The new comics represented about 10% of sales, and back issues were 90% of sales.
Interesting. Sure.
So, and that obviously evolved into completely the opposite through the years. But anyway, I remember spending my first US Thanksgiving at the store, which was closed, and everyone, was off with their family.
Oh, you're like Ebenezer Scrooge at school, and everyone's going home for Christmas. You poor thing.
There was, I didn't know people. And it was US Thanksgiving. So anyway, I completely redid the Berkeley store back issue bins, and bagged and tagged and priced, and did all of that. And then what? And so I decided retailer newsletters were starting to be a thing. And so we began the Telegraph Wire, myself and my then co-editor, Tim Wallace, who had worked at Grand Rapids Distribution in Michigan. Anyway, it was just a Xerox 3 or 4 page thing that we stapled and handed out to people. But within a year, it morphed into an actual magazine, a 32-page bi-monthly, loosely modeled on the Comics Journal. So I would find someone to interview, generally something new that would be coming out that they, were publishing, and needed the PR. And Comics and Comics wanted that PR to sell whatever it was. So that person that I would interview, I would beg them to do some cover art, or to give me some old art that I could turn into a cover. So interviews, reviews, news, that kind of thing. And it was all, again, Tom Orzechowski, who was really one of my first friends, first people that I met when I moved to Berkeley. Tom had spent 10 years working in the Marvel bullpen as a production artist, which is where he started lettering. When I met him, of course, he was the Uncanny X-Men letterer, and completely shocked that anyone even knew who he was. But of course, I was reading X-Men. This is 1981. Of course, I was reading X-Men. 300,000 people were reading X-Men every month, right? And so Tom taught me about paste up, and he taught me about page design, and I mean the rudiments thereof. I don't think I have an artistic bone in my body, but graphic design, it's something that you can learn. So Tom, I typed up every single word in that 32-page magazine. And because, of course, we did not have personal computers in the early 80s. And so everything was typed and then printed out and pasted onto old school print mechanicals. And I found a printer, and off we went. And really, so I really learned a lot about editing right there, And I also, in order to do the Telegraph Wire, I had to make it financially viable. So I also had to go out and solicit paid advertising, which was really hard to do.
I bet. Yeah, for real.
Yeah. But I managed to sweet talk enough people at the companies to do that. And it was, of course, how I got to meet everyone in the industry, which at that time was small enough that you could meet everyone in the industry. So yeah, that was it was great fun too. Interviewing was great fun, though transcribing is not. So
I am in your world, but buddy, I believe me, I understand.
I
I
do
hear you.
not envy you at
Well,
all.
again, my friend Owen McCauley is really doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and I have a good friend who's editing for me as well, Laura Marin. I'll name check them because they'll be in the book, certainly when the book is ready. But no, it's so great. I'm glad, and thank you for pointing me to the Internet Archive, which I adore. Everyone should support and don't throw your, and sorry, everybody who is in the Wikipedia world, don't throw your money to Wikipedia. Throw it to the Internet Archive if you want to donate, because there are so many lost films, books, publications, and you got like a dozen or so Telegraph Wire issues, and
Mhm.
they're comparable. You just pounding away on the typewriter and stuff to what we got a couple years later, and you were involved with things like Amazing Heroes from Fantagraphics and David Anthony Kraft with Comics Interview, and certainly the Comics Journal. You mentioned Gary Groth. And
Mhm.
no, they're cool. And also, my God, I was impressed. I was expecting more of a handmade newsletter, but there are ads from Marvel, and you got cover art and interior images. Scott McCloud, Dave Stevens, all these, the Hernandez brothers, if I remember correctly. I mean, these are great, and it's great because, and seriously, one of my guests recently made a kind comment about what I do, and it's like, and compared to what I do to what you guys were doing, not only in Telegraph Wire but also later in Amazing Heroes, that you were doing these interviews of what these creators were thinking at the moment, and that's really important. I mean, it's great to look back and appreciate from an analytical standpoint a body of work, but it is really great that we have these kind of artifacts. And this is what Dave Stevens was thinking while he was making The Rocketeer, or the brothers with Love and Rockets and things,
Seven
and
Rockets,
Scott
yeah.
with Zot and things. And no, that's important. And I think I think as important as looking back, what were they thinking at the moment?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it was it was fun because all along, John, and even now at age 71, I am still very much a comics fan.
Yeah,
And so I was having a blast interviewing these people. These were people whose work I was totally in love with. Um, and I think I mentioned to you before all of this that for this was Scott McCloud's very first professional interview. I interviewed Jim Valentino, one of my best friends now, and this was his first professional interview,
wow,
long, of course, before Image
certainly.
was on anyone's radar. So, yeah, well, you're very kind. I have a more critical eye on all that stuff, I have to say, but by the same token, it's the nostalgia factor is pretty high for me when I go back and look at some of that, and particularly, yeah, like the Rocketeer issue with Dave, who of course became a friend, and I became co-editor on Rocketeer with Bob Schreck, both at Comico and then at Dark Horse. And so, yeah, eh, yeah, they're fun artifacts for me. And as you say, we have a strong past in comics. And back in the day when information was not available to us so readily, we had to go out and really search for it. Um, it was really, really important. It was meaningful. And I think there's a sense in which now that information is so available, it's somehow become devalued a little, I don't know, it's not as important to us. We don't go out and look for that stuff in the way that we used to,
It's trivialized, I think.
Yeah.
And or also and it's interesting because really I've gone back and forth with a guy like Vince Coletta, and I know kind of infamous and everything. And the very simple I think modern take is, well, he erased a lot of Jack Kirby's lines on Thor, so we hate him. And it's like, yeah, okay, but
He
have you
was
ever
he was, I think, under orders to do that too, though.
Well, yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's like I keep telling some of my fellow podcasters who are quick to that kind of dismissal, I'm like, it's deadline art. It had to be done so it could go to the print. And yeah, Diana's nodding right now because she knows as well. Yeah, it's got to get to the printer. But further, I know he was a jerk. And I mean, I'm really glad I talked to Dennis Cowan, who told me how he shut him down when he was trying to get in the business. And it's like, no, we already got a black guy working here. Sorry, and didn't say it in even
Wow.
that.
What an asshole.
Yeah, massive asshole, massive
Yeah.
asshole. So
Huh.
that's what I'm saying. It's like I really went from hey, kind of a little sympathetic to no, he was also personally an asshole. But regardless, there are a lot of assholes that make great art. And I've seen Vince's Good Girl romance books and Wonder Woman and things like that. And it's like, um, a little more to the story than just erasing Thor lines. I don't know how to
Hmm.
break it to you.
Hmm.
But again,
Hmm.
we need to talk to people like yourself that were there and could kind of, not in the case of Vince, but in the 70s and 80s and everything. And it's like, no, again, you've interacted with these people. You talked to Scott when Zot was brand new, and you talked to Valentino when his stuff was brand new. And it's like, no, that's again, perspective and context, I think is really, really important. And sometimes that's lost when, like you say, the information age is just, well, here's the quick, the cliff notes to use our old
Hmm. Hmm.
things that we used to use.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's a reference people will understand.
Yeah. My God, I know. Remember, good Lord, an entire section of the book stores would literally have rows of cliff notes. And if people don't know, summaries of novels and things. So if you had to write a term paper and you didn't want to
Yep.
read 400 pages, you could
Yep.
read 20 pages of cliff notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and now, of course, they're just, I mean, it's a huge problem in schools because the kids are letting AI do their work for
Oh,
them.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and to the point that my sister Barbara, married to Matt Wagner, Barbara is a high school English lit teacher, and she's having her students do their essays in class because if they bring them home and my God, they have AI trackers in the schools now so that you feed in the student's essay and it yeah, it picks up where the student has found it and what's been copied and pretty
I know.
sophisticated, but pretty sad. And parents' response to that is, oh no, my little Johnny maybe looked up a word, but that's it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
nobody wants to believe that their kids don't give a shit about school and that, yeah. So,
Yep. I know, buddy. It sucks. And it's been interesting. I have heard some interviews with some educators where they're finding ways to incorporate AI and say,
mhm.
okay, we'll use it in conjunction with the original thing that I want you to use. And I'm hoping that more teachers are aware of that and are putting that in the classroom, hopefully. But again, this is why I like doing my interviews and talking to people like yourself who were there, who can bring the context of what was happening then. So, going from working at the store in the Telegraph Wire, then you did start to contribute to Amazing Heroes and some of the other publications.
Yeah, actually, while I was working at Comics and
Okay.
Comics, I think it was Kim Thompson who first contacted me. Amazing Heroes had those annual yearly preview issues, what was coming up, and Kim found me. Maybe he'd seen the Telegraph Wire. I don't know. And I was a letter hack as well. I was writing letters to comics, letters to the
Which,
Comics Journal.
yeah, I was going to say, which publications were you sending letters to?
Yeah, well, you'll find me in Frank's Daredevils all over the place.
Excellent.
Uh, yeah, lots of Marvels at the
Okay,
time, several issues of Cerebus.
cool.
Yeah. And yeah, the journal. I don't think any DCs at the time. Cerebus and a raft of Marvels, but particularly Daredevil. I was a huge Frank fan. So um, anyway, Kim found me and offered me some writing gigs for Amazing Heroes and for that for the preview book. And interestingly, he asked me to interview the guys at this new company just outside Philadelphia called Comico, and what were they going to be doing in the upcoming year. And so that was my first connection with Matt Wagner. Um, who knew that a year or two later I'd actually be working there and would be Matt's editor.
That's
So
amazing. Yeah,
weird how these connections get made, you know.
absolutely.
And again, it was so, I mean, my God, you remember the industry was so much smaller back then. So you really, really could meet anyone. And there were like about five women in comics back then. You know,
Yeah, who
uh,
did you really exactly? Because
yeah.
really, who'd you look up to? Because truly, it's been so great, Diana. Because I'm pleased to say that I've put you together with some of the people that have come after you. Like when I had you with Vita and Shelly Bond, Vita Ayala, and we were able to do that little round table, and other
Hmm.
times and everything. I'm glad because I literally I was telling Alice, our friend Allison Baker, the other day from Monkey Brain Publishing, and everything that she accomplished. And she's like, remind her again, she's my hero, and she's the reason why I felt I could make these steps forward. So who were the, I mean, my God, yeah, can you name check? I mean, Marie Severin was kind of, I get maybe still around doing stuff. I'm trying to think of the women.
Marie was a colorist, and she was actively coloring at that time.
Okay,
I don't think she was drawing at that
okay,
point. And in fact, there were very few women artists, uh,
yeah, Ramona.
except in the undergrounds.
Right, of course.
That's where you would find, and being in the Bay Area. When I met Tom Orzechowski, he was living in the downstairs flat of a three-story house in San Francisco, a house owned by Trina Robbins and Steve Lealoha, who lived in the
Absolutely,
upstairs flat.
that's
I
great.
I never met whoever lived in the middle, um, but I spent a lot of time in the downstairs flat at Tom's, and of course got to know Trina and Steve.
That's
And
so great.
Trina very generously took me under her wing, and introduced me to a bevy of people, which I was able to pay back a little bit through the Telegraph Wire and through hosting PR events, Women's Day events at Comics and Comics with Trina. And in those days, Melinda Gebbie was
Sure.
still living in the San Francisco Bay Area. Dory Sita was still alive and still doing fantastic work. Um, Gosh, I'm trying to think. Terry Richards, Lee Mars, of course.
Wendy
Um,
and Wendy Pinney, was she, or was she
no,
wasn't doing it
they
yet?
were they were
A little later.
ElfQuest had begun.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, ElfQuest was 77 or 78, but
Okay.
they were living back east at that
Ah,
point.
okay. Okay.
So yeah,
Understood.
yeah,
Understood.
north
But
of New York.
I'm glad you mentioned Trina because yeah, my God, And also, what was it like? I mean, working at the store and suddenly seeing this underground black and white movement. I mean, we had the head shop comics of Crumb and things prior
Hmm.
to that, but really that 80s period, I mean, and I love talking about it because it was exciting for me. It really brought me back to comics in the mid 80s. I was telling you off the air, obviously. We grew up our generations grew up with comics. We hit high school age and it's like, all right, I want to date. I need to be able to afford taking girls out. Let me stop reading comics. And also maybe not the girl might not find it interesting that I like comics, unfortunately. But yeah, man, I mean that again, like kind of seeing all that happen. And also when you would have women's days at the stores and stuff, was that great to suddenly discover? I mean, how much of a discovery was it that, oh, thank God, I'm not the only girl in the boys' club and everything?
Right. Although, I mean, these were all artists, and that was not me, clearly. My
Yeah.
my mother was an artist, and
Oh, wow.
so I was completely like that was her thing, and never could be my thing. My youngest sister, Trish, is also an artist, and she was trained in classical animation
Oh, wow.
at Sheridan College outside of Toronto and went on to work for George Lucas's ILM for 20 years,
Wow.
having to shift, of course, from classical to computer animation.
Sure.
Um,
Wow.
but she inherited my mom's artistic talent. I did not. Um, and so my heroes, I guess, Wheezy Simonson
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
certainly was one.
Yeah.
Uh, Karen Berger and I we were at the same time. So
Okay.
Karen was not, in fact, I think I started editing before Karen. So um, yeah, Wheezy Simonson, Maggie Thompson, who was editor-in-chief of Comics Buyer's Guide, of course,
Absolutely.
uh,
Yes.
Tad Ironwood, who
Yes.
was editor-in-chief at Eclipse Comics,
Absolutely.
and Kat and Dean lived just up the road in Guerneville, California, so they would come to Berkeley uh, every few weeks and stay at my apartment. So
Cool.
got to know them really well at the time, still really close to Dean. Uh, and he's, of course, still in comics with
Yes.
his Library of American Comics imprint.
Incredible work. Yes, indeed.
Fantastic. Yeah. Um, so, yeah, they're just, women editors. Did I know very many? No, not really. And at that time, really you know, the the hub of comics was New York, and I was on the West Coast. So I didn't the people that I met were a bit random, mostly women artists. Um, I, I guess I would meet sometimes a woman editor at a convention or whatever, but I met Maggie in Chicago. Um, this was 1983 or 84, and Creation Con was hosting a Doctor Who convention in Chicago.
I might have
And
been at that convention. Keep
oh
going.
my God, John, they were now understand, I had never seen a Doctor Who show. I still haven't seen a Doctor Who
Oh,
show.
wow.
Yeah, I shouldn't even admit that. I'd
That's
actually kind of
okay.
like to see anyway. But at that time, I knew nothing about Doctor Who.
Okay.
Um, Bob Schreck was running the show in Chicago, and we were in a long distance relationship at that point with Bob in New York and me living in Berkeley.
Yeah.
And he started hiring me to work the shows. So Creation would fly me to wherever, and I would work with him for a weekend. We'd get to see each other that way. So I worked the Doctor Who show in Chicago. Um, and Maggie Thompson reminded me recently, which something I've completely forgotten, which was that I I made it possible for her and her late husband Don, and maybe even their kids, I forget, to have dinner with Tom Baker,
Oh, my
to
God.
join
Yeah.
us for dinner with the then Doctor Who, I guess. Um, and yeah, Baker was fantastic. He was a hoot. my job that weekend was to be Baker's minder.
Oh,
And
wow.
so, and he loved the fact that I knew nothing about Doctor Who. So we just kind of hung out all weekend, and I made sure he got to where he had to be. And my most important job was at 10:30 every morning. I had to have in his hands a whiskey sour or an old fashioned. I forget, something with a lot of whiskey in his hands,
Fantastic.
10:30 every morning. So, I made it happen. Made it happen. He loved my ass. That was great. But John, it was summer of 83 or 84. You live in Chicago, you know what those summers are like.
Oh, yeah.
And humidity was off the charts. Sun was beating down, and people were lined up. This was like Chicago conventions, the one out by the airport, anyway. And
Yeah. Yeah.
they were lined up all the way around the huge block in long coats and hats and the big
The scarf.
multicolored scarves.
Yeah.
And, waiting like for hours to get in. Bob and I were really scared. We thought somebody was going to, die out there
Heat
because it
exhaustion,
was,
certainly. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
Dehydration. Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
luckily that did not happen, but oh my God. So that was, I was not familiar with Who fandom, and boy, oh boy, what a lesson that was,
I
man.
bet. No, that public television, thank God, and really, especially those episodes were really, I mean, people even now laugh at them because it really was low budget. I mean,
Was
really,
it?
really low budget.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. But now the modern Who since 2005, now they actually do have decent special effects and, better costumes and stuff. But no, it was the writing and the acting. And especially, my God, we all fell in love with Tom. And he had just such a engaging personality that came
Well,
through the character.
he was a theater performer, I think, right? I mean, he was a Shakespearean actor, and like David Tennant.
Yes, and I'm a big
So
David Tennant fan.
so
Absolutely.
and yeah, me too. And but I discovered him actually through Shakespeare.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Yeah.
where does he fall in he's in the later Who's, I
Yeah,
guess, but
he's number 10. Tom was the fourth Doctor, Baker, and there were subsequent ones up through the late 80s, and then there was this period in the 90s where, well, we had
mm-hmm,
one movie. Fox made a movie with
mm-hmm,
Paul McGann, and he was the eighth Doctor,
all
and then
right.
Christopher Eccleston came back in '05 as the ninth Doctor, and then but he only did one season. Tennant did several seasons, and
Mm-hmm,
even to this day, they're planning a Christmas special for this coming Christmas, and the likelihood is Tennant will be in it.
mm-hmm.
And yeah, and also, it's just like Star Trek. Thank God, um, there's still enough interest in the old actors. They find ways to put them in, and they are, of course, they're time travelers, and we even accept the fact that yes, it's literally in the cases of Baker and McCoy and Colin Baker, 40 years since their last actual appearance as the Doctor when they were the Doctor, but it's
Mm-hmm.
okay. I mean, we're
Yeah.
we're cool with it. We love, and also audio dramas. Big Finish, a wonderful British company, continues to employ them, including Baker at 90 whatever,
Wow.
to perform audio dramas as the Doctor.
Oh,
Still sounds
cool.
like the Doctor to me. And all
Hmm.
these guys and everything. And also Jodie Whittaker. I have to say I appreciated her performance as one of the more recent
No.
Doctors. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
all right. Oh, so
It's crazy.
they have a woman doctor.
Yeah, it
One.
took a long time, but yeah, finally we
Yeah.
had one. And I wish she had better scripts,
Hmm.
honestly. But that's all right. Well, back to you because I and honestly, next time I talk to Bob, I really want to talk more about his time at creation. We really stuck to his editorial time.
Yeah,
But
I was surprised that was your first interview with Bob.
honestly, shame on me because I've wanted to for years.
No shame on him. You are the OG of podcasts, John. I certainly of comics podcasts, right?
Well, there's a
Um,
couple that started a few months before me, but yeah, I'd like to say the class of 2005 we are kind of the OGs, absolutely.
Yeah,
So no,
yeah.
I hear you. But again, no, it's honestly, Diane, it's my fault. And there are so many that I'll meet and go, oh, we got to talk sometime. And then suddenly I'll look up and go, yeah, that was 3 years ago that you made that suggestion. It's like, all right, Jesus Christ, man, what the hell are you waiting for? And honestly, it was Allison. It's like, hey, you want to talk to Shrek? And I'm like, yeah, I've been meaning to. And we had
Huh.
even, I think, even passing on Facebook, hey, I just want you to know, big fan of what you do and everything else. And, and certainly through Matt and everything. I mean,
Hmm. Hmm.
Matt, my God, I got to tell you, Wagner from day one could not have been nicer to me. And really, I met him in like '05. Gene High introduced me to Matt. And I mean, he's your brother in law, so you certainly know. But I mean, could not have been nicer. And
Yeah,
again, I
he's
mean,
a good,
as
great
a
guy.
reader, what you guys were doing at Comico, it was thrilling. And it really was in my college years. And I'm like, oh my God. So now beyond DC and Marvel, and yes, there was, Gold Key when we were little kids and things, and Dell. But it's like, no, man, and Harvey and all the other things for little kids and stuff. But it's like, oh my God, now there's stuff that really seems to be aimed at college, age kids and even
Well,
adults.
not
Oh me,
not yeah, not all of it. I
no,
we we were trying,
yeah,
um, but yeah, I mean, I lived down Robotech, which was one
yes.
of my earliest gigs.
Tell me about that because truly that was the one thing I would look in Amazing Heroes at the checklist for every publisher. And it's like, God damn, there's a shit ton of Robotech apparently.
Yeah, well, it was, uh, they were adaptations of the US, of the American cartoon, which was the original Japanese anime, three different series, but the American production company, which I believe was headed by Carl Macek, the late Carl Macek, took those three different Japanese animes, turned them into one kind of storyline. I and I believe me, I don't know or don't remember quite how that worked, not very well, I don't think, but my God, it generated a lot of fans. And Comico brought Bob on board to they were negotiating that license and they were out of their league. So Bob came on board. Suddenly they had the Robotech license, and that meant three different comics titles, three different comic series, and they had to get one out every 2 weeks. So I think at the end of the day, there was about a total of 100. Each series ran 30 some issues. But
Wow.
yeah, every 2 weeks, and I was brand new. Um, and the people that I was working with were brand new. And we were all kind of really just learning our chops back then. I mean, and the work really shows it.
Okay.
But that was, I mean, you got to learn somewhere somehow, and
Yeah.
that's how we did it. And my God, we had fans. Yeah, the kids loved it.
Yeah.
Uh, but at the same time, we had Matt. We had Matt and Mage, Matt and Grendel. Um, we had the Johnny Quest license,
Yes.
uh, I-
Doug
which
Wildey involved with that,
Doug
obviously.
Doug Wildey came on board for that, because I knew that he had created the character and said, "Hey, let's contact the creator and get him, see if we can't get him to do covers or stories and that worked out beautifully." Um, I was not happy. Feelings were not happy with Eclipse at the time because Doug was not so happy at Eclipse, and so he pulled Rio, which
Loved
they had
Rio.
been publishing, but he
Yeah.
pulled that and brought it to us at Comico and then
Wow.
later at Dark Horse. So, I mean, there was, I think, enough of a market to go around for everyone, but it It's hard when you lose a creator who's important to you and they go off to another publishing company. And my God, the publishing companies were growing like dandelions at that point. We were all coming in late 70s, early 80s with this idea that we were going to change the world of comics and make comics creator friendly and give creators ownership and royalties and all that good stuff. Um, and yeah, it did change the world, but um, sadly, some of the companies began with great intentions and just kind of became another big company and
Kind
not.
of personal greed with some of these individual
Yeah,
companies.
kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All
kind of.
right.
First Comics, for instance, billed itself as a creator owner company, but in point of fact, their contracts were not creator ownership contracts. First controlled, first held copyright and trademark. And that was a little known secret. So, for instance, when Nexus came to Dark Horse, Mike Richardson had to buy out uh, he had to buy out whoever First Comics, first had gone bankrupt. So whoever whoever's hands that the remains of First Comics was in, they own Nexus. And Mike bought it, bought
Wow.
it out and gave it back to Barron and Rude.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, he doesn't tell that story. I don't know why, because it's an important one. But yeah, so there were companies who were billing themselves as creator companies that were not necessarily or not all the way. Even Vertigo owned the trademark. Their contract specified that they own the trademark. So if you created something for Vertigo and then that relationship didn't work out and you walked away, DC held the trademark to your character for up to 10 years. You could ask and please may I have it back, and they might give it back to you, but not necessarily. Um, and that was another little known secret.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's,
So,
I mean, I know, well, it's weird, Dinah, because I absolutely respect creators getting it back. And, I've
mm,
had Dennis Kitchen on the show a couple times, and he certainly talked about how that was important as an underground publisher for him and as
yeah,
a creator.
yeah.
But also, um, I do understand it's shitty, but like with Watchmen, for example, my
Hmm.
my blanket statement was nobody was expecting Moby Dick. But that's kind of
Right.
what happened. And
Yeah.
if a company has that control and it's a perennial bestseller, they're not going to give it
They're
up.
not going
And
to give it
it
up.
sucks
No.
for Alan and
Yep.
Dave.
Yep.
And I've really I'd like to say I have a nice acquaintanceship with Dave. And and
A
he
great
gets it.
guy.
Yeah, wonderful. Truly, I always say him and Simonson, Walter, are like the two nicest guys as far as the grand old men. And it's
Yeah.
just like, my God, they've been incredible to me since day one, and it means so much to me. But yeah, it sucks. And I mean, like when before Watchmen happened 15 years ago, I'm like, I get it. And it sucks for Alan and Dave.
Hmm.
Dave seemed to understand. Also, poor Alan Moore, and believe me, Alan Moore's fine and continues to thankfully make great stuff. But I'm always like my analogy, unfortunately, I don't mean to laugh, but it's like he was married to Watchmen, and or I always my analogy is he had a wife. They built this incredible house, dream house, pool, everything, and then they got divorced, and DC got to keep the house. And anytime someone wants to interview Alan Moore, it's like, hey, let's talk about the house that you used to have
Right.
with that.
Yeah.
Wasn't that great?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, I
Yeah.
totally understand. It's like, my God, that's like, it's this burden. And I said the same thing to Dave. And thankfully, Dave really, it seems, well, and especially after reading his autobiography, it seems like he's in a good place with it. But yeah, I'm like, and again, Dave, they both continue to make interesting stuff. But I'm like, Dave, like it or not, man, when that sad day comes and we're reading your obituary, It's going to be in the first paragraph, co-creator of
Yep.
Watchmen.
Yeah.
And there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with that because, my God, when Time Magazine says your graphic novel is among the 100 best novels of the
Right.
20th
Yeah.
century, it's like,
Yeah.
what an achievement and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sadly, again,
Absolutely.
DC owns
Yeah.
Moby Dick at the end of the
Yeah.
day, and it
Yeah.
sucks.
Yeah. It does suck. And yes, and I mean, to me, it's really important. Ownership, creator ownership is incredibly important. And the kinds of changes that the independent publishers were able to get through uh, uh, became standard, and that's fantastic. By the same token, and this goes back to your point about context, newer creators don't don't necessarily know the history, um, and and sometimes take those things for granted without, not realizing just how hard we had to fight for all of that to happen. Um, my heart broke that I got to work with Jim Mooney very briefly. And Jim, of course, had drawn all those Supergirl stories that I was in love with as
Yes.
a little girl.
Yeah.
And he did some Johnny Quest work. Again, it was Richard Howell who brought Jim on board. And so I was on the phone with Jim, and it had taken me about 2 weeks of actually working with Jim as an artist to finally get up the nerve to ask him this question, which was, would you maybe have any of those old Supergirl pages that you might be interested in selling to me? It broke my heart when the man said, "Oh no, Diane, I'm so sorry. They were all shredded."
Oh my God.
Shredded. And
Yeah.
that's routinely what
Wow.
happened. They were the pages, again, pages remained with the publishing company, DC or Marvel. They were given out to people, they were stolen, they were taken home by editors for their own collection
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Or, yeah, they were shredded at the printer because they were considered printer mechanicals. And once the work was published, that was it. Get
Yeah.
rid of it. We don't have the space to store it. And so, yeah,
Sick. Yeah.
sad, sad, sad days. And so when the independent companies began, and I put that with Mike Friedrich's Star Reach in 74. And Mike built Star Reach based on sort of the underground model, where creators would keep their art, own their copyright. Um, but the kind of work he was publishing was not underground work, it was mainstream
Yeah.
adventure comics.
Yeah.
So he began, then Gary at Fantagraphics, and then Dean at Eclipse. And then in 81, we had Pacific, Comico, first, not really first, but
I'm hip.
and uh, and plus the self-publishing movement. Dave Sim came in
Cerebus. Yeah.
78, and the Peonies right at the
Yes.
same time. They were within like 6 months of each other, first issues of Cerebus and ElfQuest. So it was a happening time in terms
Yeah.
of, and it was a political time. Artists were out there. You know, I Frank in particular was really vocal about rights of artists. And so they were out there and speaking about these issues that were important to them. And the answer was independent publishing, which came into being right around the same time as the direct market. So there was a home for all these independent publications, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great time to sort of come of age in comics, I guess. Um, but yeah, some of the early work I look back on and kind of cringe. Yeah, but
Because
you got to learn somewhere. So
so those pages, those Robotech pages, I would imagine then the licensor has the rights to them. Have they ever been reprinted, those Comico Robotechs?
The Titan has reprinted them.
Okay.
Um, though I haven't seen them. Um, but the original art was returned to all the artists.
Okay.
That was I wouldn't work anywhere that didn't do that. In fact, I mean, I think I lasted 4 days at Marvel.
Yeah, I
Um,
wanted to ask about that
yeah.
exactly. Yes, thank you for bringing that up. I might have slipped and not asked you about
it,
that.
it was the pie in the sky job offer, right? I had been doing the Telegraph Wire. I'd moved to New York because Bob and I were really tired of a 3,000-mile relationship. And we didn't have email in those days. We didn't have cell phones. Our phone bills were
I was good.
intense.
Yeah, those are the days when $50 phone call if you're out for an hour.
Yes, and yeah, and I mean, I remember we used to speak late at night California time, middle of the
Oh my
night
God.
Bob's time. And I remember once we both fell asleep on the phone, and that bill, yeah, that was like hundreds of dollars. So, so I had moved to New York. I'd left comics, or I was still doing the Telegraph Wire, but I was doing it from New York, freelance.
Okay.
And then, and Marvel offered me the job, and I thought this is great. And it was the X-Men office. I had
Wow.
Chris Claremont, Frank Miller, and the assistant editor whom I was replacing, Peter Sanderson, for recommending me. Um, and 4 days in, and it was just not for me. It was not for me at all. It was a Midtown Manhattan corporation, and I'd been used to working in small spaces with people who loved comics, and this was not that. There were some people who were very kind to me. Annie Nocenti, for whom I was working, was a sweetheart. Michael Higgins was an editor there at the time, and he was so good to me. But I was really out of my element. It was not the place for me.
Wow.
So yeah, 4 days. And I'm an old hippie. I was a young hippie then, and taking the train in from Long Island with the rest of the commuters. Oh, John, just that I'm not that person. So yeah, 4 days. But I learned a lot in 4 days. I really did.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
most
Who was the editor when you were the assistant?
Annie
Oh,
Nocenti.
Annie was
Yeah,
the editor. Okay,
and
because I
she
was
yeah,
thinking of her as a writer more so than an editor. Okay.
right. But this was before she left to go freelance,
Okay.
and she was editing X-Men. I mean, it was Marvel's best-selling book. I couldn't have
Yeah.
asked for a better job, a
Yeah.
better place to start, but I just was so uncomfortable there.
Were you frightened, Diana? Because honestly, it reminds me of what I've always heard about Gary Shandling. He always wanted to be the Tonight Show host, and then he did it for a while and realized what a grind it was. And it's like, well, this was my ambition, and if my dream job isn't what I want, then what the fuck am I going to do? Did you have that kind of crisis of conscience?
I was frightened of Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief at
Understood.
that point, and
Yeah. Was he
he
tough?
was a
Was he
he
kind of
was a
shitty?
bit of a dictator, yeah.
Okay.
In fact, my day 5 at the office, the day I called in to Annie and said, I can't do this, um, was my quote unquote indoctrination lecture day with Shooter, because all the assistant editors who came in were set up to meet with Jim early in their, like sometime in their first week, for what everyone called the indoctrination lecture. And I was scared shitless about that. So um, I managed to avoid being indoctrinated by quitting. Um,
You didn't go to the meeting.
I did not. I called in
Okay.
that day and I quit. That was day 5. I lasted 4 days. And
Wow.
yeah, so yeah, Shooter scared me. He had some very definite ideas. I'm sure it was a long time ago, so
Yeah.
yeah, my memory fades, but I'm sure I suffered from imposter syndrome. I was a little West Coast gal who was on the beach in Berkeley and suddenly in Midtown Manhattan with a boss who like knew everything there was to know, and he was going to tell you it, and you were going to follow what he said. And yeah, anyway, yeah,
Wow. Well,
I'm
you're not alone. I mean, I certainly know the legions that left Marvel because
yeah,
they
because
didn't
of
like the way Jim was. Absolutely.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know.
yeah. But
Did you, and in later years, did you ever like reconcile, or no, you just kind of stayed on your side of the world and let Jim stay on his side of the world?
well, I mean, I didn't, there was no overt kind of issue,
Okay. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he just scared me, basically. He's a very tall guy,
Well, yeah, he is. He was a
Of
big man.
course,
Absolutely.
like 9 years later, I went to work for an equally tall guy, and
Yes. Mike.
Shooter and Mike Richardson, could look each other eye to eye. About the only two people I know who could do that.
The Twin
So,
Towers of comics.
yeah, yes,
Absolutely.
right.
Yes.
Um, but it,
So
yeah,
did he remember that you worked at Marvel briefly,
oh,
right? Or
oh,
did you?
sure. No, no,
And like, were you guys cordial at least when you'd see each
they
other?
absolutely. And
Okay. Yeah, I was just
he
wondering.
knew, they knew who I was because of Telegraph Wire. Um, I,
Sure, certainly.
I'd been soliciting their ads. I'd been interviewing their artists and their editors. I had one issue had been dedicated to the Star Line. I'd interviewed Tom DeFalco.
Sure.
Um, so yeah, I mean it was all friendly. I was
Okay.
just really out of my element there.
Buddy,
And
I truly in sports, there were people that I've gotten to know that I would never want to work for. But
yeah,
absolutely, but again, I got to know them because of
but you
being in
but
the business,
you
so
worked in but you worked in corporate space.
I did. I did.
Yeah.
Well, although much like you, my first job was at a rock station and even the sports station, and we were independently owned for the first couple of years, and it
Mm.
was all ex hippies, so I can
Hmm.
absolutely relate. And then Westinghouse bought the two radio stations, and then CBS bought Westinghouse or went into business with Westinghouse. And but even then, thankfully, in those early years they let the original ownership kind of still run the place and knew they had a special thing. And so
Hmm.
over the years it transitioned into being much more corporate. But
But
the
not
first
immediately.
no, the first handful of years it was still the corner office, everybody hanging out. And I mean literally, all these great art, rock artists would come in. Hey, it's Elvis Costello. And yeah, he'll talk on the air, but he'll hang out with us later and have coffee and stuff. And yeah, I've said it before. It's like living in a Monkees episode because it really was like, oh, hey, how you doing, Pete Townsend? Oh, you want to sing? Oh, great. Why don't you just pick up a guitar and start singing? And it was insane. As
Wow.
Shelly loves it. Brian Ferry from Roxy Music, who she adores. She's like,
Right.
tell me, and literally every time I talk, she's like, tell me the Brian Ferry story again. And I'm like, all right, here you go. It isn't much of a story, but yes, I did meet Brian Ferry, and it was amazing. So, but no, that's why, and truly, buddy, this is why I love talking to people like yourself because I really do feel a couple years later, I was kind of experiencing the same thing of a grassroots broadcast situation and then going
Hmm.
into the corporate world. So I can absolutely appreciate that.
And but you said the transition wasn't abrupt, but
No.
how, like by the time it got there, how was that for you?
Well, again, it was slowing. I'm the lobster in the warm water that suddenly is boiling and don't
Right,
realize that I'm
right,
slowly
right.
dying. But I will say, 20 years in Chicago radio, by the end, I was really becoming a little tired of having to do the dance.
Hmm.
And I really found it a little frustrating. So, as much as I didn't want to be downsized, I can't say that I am itching to crawl back. And
Hmm.
it's just like newspapers and every corporation sort of situation where they're consolidating and fewer jobs and finding, fewer reasons to hire people. Unless you're a
Hmm.
big radio star, you're making shit money and
Yeah.
it's not worth the blood, sweat, and tears to make the product, and a kid will take it because they're eager to get in the business.
Right.
I'm fucking old. I can't do it like that anymore. And that's
Yeah.
why, thank God,
And nor should you have to.
well, the digital platform, thankfully, has afforded me the opportunity in a very meager way. And once again, an opportunity to say thank you, Word Balloon patrons, truly for helping me keep the lights on that you see above me right now. But yeah, I mean, I am very lucky that the democratization of media has allowed me to slip into this. When I started, it was just a lark to generate interview material to get that next broadcast job.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then, about 10 years into it, suddenly it's like, hey, the Science Channel is calling. They want you on this Prophets of Science Fiction TV show because of your podcast and other weird opportunities like that. And it's like, well, that's not coming because I'm making radio commercials or
Right.
anything. So that's kind of cool. And yeah, again, the last 5 years, it's been like, all right, let me see if I can, make Word Balloon happen on my own. So again, I feel this kinship with a lot of the comic creators that are doing creator-owned stuff. And again, even, going back to the black and white days of the 80s and stuff, and when these companies were forming and being like, no, I think we can do this and maybe do it more fairly in the case of working with others. So I think that, again, I see the similarity, and I tell that to a
Mm-hmm.
lot of my,
Mm-hmm.
my friends that are writers and artists and stuff, that I feel like I kind of, in the last 20 years, saw them as they were breaking in, and now they're established. The Tom Kings, the Tim Seeleys, the Mike,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
people like that. And even Kelly Sue, who was relatively new and just getting started when I was getting
Yep.
started. And now, she's
Yep.
a rock star now.
Mm-hmm.
Gail as well, Simone. So,
Yeah.
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 Anyway, but back to you. So,
Well,
so yeah, I mean, Comico, did you want to leave? Was there getting shitty and you wanted to get
Bob
out? I mean, what
Bob
happened?
was Bob was Bob was working at Comico. I had blown up the Marvel thing, but I
Uh-huh.
had learned some stuff, and most importantly, I think in my 4 days at Marvel, I learned from Virginia Romita, who was not Annie was my boss, but Virginia, mother of
Johnny.
J.R. Jr.,
Yep,
wife of John. Uh,
absolutely.
Virginia was Marvel's production manager.
Yep.
So she was the one who got the trains to run on time. And her production schedules were a work of art, and they were constantly in process because people blew deadlines. And so then you had to rework that schedule.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and a few months after Marvel, my Marvel
Exodus.
experience, yeah, blew up. Uh, I sort of, I'd moved all the way to New York, and now Bob was going down to fucking Philadelphia all week. So this was not really working
Yeah,
well
what
for
the hell,
me.
man?
And
You moved across
yeah,
country, and now he's another 100 miles away, a couple of 100 miles away.
so I kind of began to insinuate myself there. And really, those guys didn't know me from Adam.
Okay.
I mean, a little bit. I had interviewed them for Amazing Heroes, but anyway, it was thanks to Bob Schreck's immense and generous coattails that I rode into my job at Comico. But I rode in, they got the Robotech license. They didn't have an editor. They didn't have anyone there who knew anything about editing comics. I knew 4 days worth of editing comics, but I did know how to edit. I knew how to get something out on a regular basis,
Yeah.
and these were periodical comics. Matt was also, he'd begun Mage, and Matt needed someone to schedule him as well and get that happening every 2 months. It was a bi-monthly comic. And
Okay.
so I just sort of said, look, I can do this for you. I know how to make schedules, and let's go. And I did. In fact, in one interview, Bob called me Mussolini because
Ha!
because I got the trains running on time. and that was it. I knew how to schedule,
Yeah.
and I just got going. I came in as editorial coordinator, but before long I was editing every book they were publishing.
Wow.
So and and things were fine there. I mean, we struggled, but it was small. There were really just a few of us, um, and everything was working very well until they were seduced by the newsstand. Um, they wanted Comico to be distributed on the newsstand, and newsstand distribution requires you to overprint your comics in huge numbers. And you don't find out what your sell through is until about 9 or 10 months later.
Isn't that crazy?
So, yeah. And so for those first 9 or 10 months, you are printing, printing, printing in numbers. And here's the thing, Carol Kalish, who was the direct sales rep at Marvel,
Yes.
and a good friend, um, and that's how I'd met Richard Howell. Carol and Richard were together, and Carol said, "Do not do this. Do not go on the newsstand because you're going to lose your shirts. Your comics are expensive to produce. They're not newsprint comics. You're putting a lot of money into production value, and you're going to have to overprint to the extent that there's no way, you're going to find out months later that you've only sold 15% of your print run, and you're going to eat the rest with the printer." And so when everyone else said, "Yeah, let's go," they had dollar signs in their eyes. And I said, "No." Carol says no. And I got to trust Carol because she knows and we
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
But they
Nobody would
just
listen.
nobody would listen.
Yeah.
They saw the dollars and they said, "Let's go." And sure enough, just as Carol predicted, within a year we were in debt, and I knew we were in debt, and I was nervous about it because the other thing you have to do as an editor is you have to like budget your comics. Um, and that was not happening at Comico. And I tried to sort of nose my way into the accounting and see what our numbers were because I was trying to budget stuff, but I didn't know what we were paying the printer. I didn't know what we were paying to the color separator to make the film, because this is back in the days when comics were old school, made
Yeah.
with actual tangible film, not digital files. And
Absolutely. Old technology. Absolutely.
yeah, so I'm trying to find out all these numbers so that I can make budgets for the titles, for issues, titles, series. And I received an official slap on the wrist and a letter telling me that if I inserted myself into Comico's accounting, that this was serving as a warning. I would be tossed.
Wow.
Yeah. So
Wow.
I still have that letter. I love it.
God damn. Yeah. Good for you. Jesus.
A
All
year
right.
later, a year later, DC has made the move that Paul Levitz to this day regrets. DC um, had offered, or we had convinced them to distribute our books. So we were part of DC's solicitation, and they handled all of our distribution for us for a percentage
Sure.
of sales.
Sure.
And we're in a meet, and because of that, we were in meetings every month at DC. Drove
Uh-huh.
up to New York, and it was the end of 83, end of 83.
Okay.
And Paul wants to know how 84 is looking, and have you done your P&Ls for 84? And the two owners of Comico, the Lasorda brothers, looked at each other with their eyebrows raised, and said, "What's a P&L?"
Profit
And
and loss, I'm assuming, right?
yeah, profit
All
and
right.
loss,
Thank you.
exactly. Levitz almost fell off his chair. I must have turned purple. I was so embarrassed. I think I told you, I was learning, uh, I had gone to school and signed up to take a computer course because this was a new thing in, oh, so I'm okay. This was a new thing in 88. It was December of 88, not 83.
Okay.
And and computers were new and I didn't know anything about them. I wanted to learn them. So I took this course, and in the context of that, I learned Excel. I learned about budgeting, and I learned what a P&L was. And it was just, I wouldn't have known myself, but it just so happened that I'd taken this course or was still taking this course. And yes, I had learned all these new things about accounting. And so I said, I can do those P&Ls for Comico. I can do it
Yeah.
for
Wow.
1989. I can figure it out. Just, let me go home. I'll rent a computer because yeah, that
Yeah,
was
you didn't
that
know.
was
Yeah,
how it
exactly. There
how
were
it worked at the time. I couldn't
thousands of
afford to
dollars to
buy
own a
one.
computer
Yeah.
back then. Absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And I'll rent a computer for 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks. Give me access to the numbers, and I will provide you your P&Ls for 1989. And so I got those 2 weeks in January of 89, and I came out and and saw that they were in so much debt. I finally at that point saw the debt, the huge amount of debt that Comico was in to the printer because of these newsstand sales, because of this overprinting. And there was just, given the small number of comics we were publishing, there was no way out of this debt. There was never going to be any way out of this debt unless somebody dumped a fat load of money on the company. It was not going to happen. So I went, at this point, forget DC, I went to Comico at the end of 2 weeks with my numbers and spoke to the two Lasorda brothers and said, "You are going into bankruptcy. It's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's going to happen within the next year. You are going into bankruptcy, and I will help you prepare for bankruptcy. We owe all this money to all these different places, but let's get the artists paid off. Let's get all their art returned. Let's take care of them because these people depend on this to pay their rent." And the fucking printer who has got you into this shithole of owed money, to hell with them. Let them eat the debt, but let's take care of the artists. And those two Lasorda brothers, just like ostriches, put their heads in the ground and said, "We're not going to go bankrupt." I turned to Bob and said, "We're quitting.
We'll get the fuck out of here. Absolutely.
We're quitting."
God damn.
Because,
Yeah.
yeah,
You're now facing reality. Yeah, yeah,
there
yeah.
was and there was no point to staying on a sinking ship. I would have helped them. I would have stayed right to the end as that ship went down if
Sure.
they would only have admitted what was going on. But they didn't. And so I said, "Let's get out of here." And that's what we did. And almost a year to the day, John, well, I was going to say we got the call, but in fact, we didn't get the call. We heard about it, you know, we heard
Yeah.
about it, yeah, and roundabout that, yeah, Comico has filed for bankruptcy,
Wow.
owing artists, owing me, because I had been working freelance for them. Uh, Artwork never returned, never returned. Um, and that's when within about 6 months, that's when the Chicago-based Comico came into being through through a man who bought I won't even say his name, but anyway,
The IP
he
or the
bought the he
assets.
yes, he bought the assets, and so that the Lasorda brothers basically got out of their debt.
Wow.
And he bought the assets. Nobody got paid,
Wow.
certainly not the artist. Artwork was not returned. And he began basically a whole new thing. He wound up buying Bill Willingham's Elementals. So that became the basis of the Chicago Comico, which was not the company that we had worked for.
Okay, so you didn't work with Willingham. You didn't. I'm assuming then you didn't work with
We
Ez, or maybe
we had worked with Bill on Elementals, but when
ownership
Comico
changed.
was bought, when the
Yeah.
ownership changed and it moved to Chicago, um, the owner claimed, the new Comico owner claimed that
No, but
he
nothing.
owned all the IP. Naturally, artists disputed that.
Certainly.
Matt certainly disputed that, but
Sure.
that hung up Grendel and Mage for 2 years.
Wow.
Matt could not work on Grendel. And in fact, it was, again, with Mike Richardson's help, that Matt's lawyer and Mike's new shark entertainment lawyers came in and finally wrested Grendel away for Matt.
Jesus.
But yeah, it was hung up for a couple of years, and
Yeah.
other, Mays Agency, uh,
Yes, of course. I
Adam
love
Adam
Maze Agency.
Hughes's,
Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, that was
God
so much
damn.
stuff got hung up, and about just about the same time that Comico declared bankruptcy, Bob and I had been offered jobs at Dark Horse again. I mean, they wanted Bob. I slid in again on his coattails
Yeah,
there.
girl.
Um, but the we at Dark Horse we would have bought some of the old film, the Johnny Quest film. We had gotten the license at Dark Horse to do Johnny Quest in 93, I think. And
Okay.
we would have bought that film from the Lasordas, but they pretended it didn't exist, which we found out later was not true. They pretended it had gone off to the Chicago Comico. That was not true. It was in the basement, in the basement at Norristown, Pennsylvania, Comico, degrading, falling to pieces when it could have
Jesus.
been reprinted and
Yeah.
made money for people. And
And remind me with Quest, Alex Toth, wasn't he working on it, and wasn't
no,
Steve, or was Rude?
Alex was the one person I wasn't able to get. I couldn't afford him. I really tried. I will say that a fond relationship developed between myself and Alex as a result of that. But no, I had a budget. I couldn't, and he wanted more, and I could not afford it. Um,
But you had Steve Rude, right?
but we had Steve Rude in the first issue. The first issue had two stories. Steve Rude did one, Doug Wildey did
Doug
the
did the
other.
other. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, uh, um, Bill Messner-Loebs
Sure.
was our writer.
Yes.
Um, I had been reading his comic journey ever since it had been published in the back of Cerebus, and so I hired him to write. It was his first non-creator owned, sort of first mainstream kind of title. This preceded the DC work.
When he worked for
Um,
the Flash, certainly.
yeah, because they saw what he was doing on Johnny Quest, and that led to his getting hired at DC.
Wow.
But he wrote 31 terrific issues of Johnny Quest, and for the first year, we had a round robin every issue of different artists. So, my God, Wendy Peeney and Joe Staten, um, uh, Al Williamson, Tommy Yates
Oh,
penciled
wow.
one issue, and Dan Adkins was the inker, but
Sure. Oh, man.
he blew the deadline, so he only had half the book done, and we had to get that many hands inking thing. So Tom helped me get a bunch of inkers on his work: Steve Lealoha, Al Williamson. Um, uh, Gosh, I don't even remember, but just, a batch of people. Dave
Yeah.
Stevens did covers for us
Yes.
on Quest.
Yes.
Um, Doug drew a couple of issues, as I recall. Dan Spiegel.
Yeah, Dan, sure.
Yeah, old school guys who really knew their shit and just
Yeah.
and who had worked on the cartoon. So they, and Bill was writing stories that were targeted, like they weren't straight adventure. They had a lot of humanity to them. He looked at the relationship of, you know,
Haji.
a widower father
Oh,
with his child,
yeah,
his
Dr.
young
Benton
boy,
Quest,
and yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
And looked into Race's background,
Sure, as a super spy and everything, and what he was
yeah,
doing before he was
stuff
with
that
the
we
doctor.
never saw in the cartoon, kind of thing, right? So
Yeah,
he grew it up a little bit,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
it was I've reread those not too long ago. In fact, they're good.
They are good.
I think they're good.
I'm with you,
Uh,
buddy. No, and again, I was, watching the reruns. I was a little too young for when the
when
first run
they
happened with
right.
Hanna-Barbera, but certainly when they would rerun them and stuff. And even to this day, I'm so glad that, MeTV Tunes every now and then will still pop on the quests and everything. It was a
Really?
great
Yeah.
And also I got the chance to
Yeah.
interview Tim Matheson, who was the voice of Johnny Quest. And,
Right.
and I didn't know that until about 10 or
Wow.
15 years ago. So that was
Hmm.
really cool to learn.
Yeah, that's fun. Well, yeah. I was the perfect age for Johnny, of course, when it came out.
Yeah,
I was 9 or
absolutely.
10,
Hell
and
yeah.
and it was the first animation to be broadcast during primetime hours, right? Um, yeah, and so I was a Quest fan, and when we got that license, it was hard work. The first 12, 13 issues with different artists every issue. That's tough on an editor. You're juggling a lot of different balls at the same time, but we made it work. And then the Mars guys, Mark Wheatley and Mark Hempel, took over for the last. They had done an issue or two in those first 13, and then they
Yeah,
took over for the rest, which made my life a little easier. And but Yeah, it was a good series.
really cool
Carmine
stuff.
Infantino did an issue.
Wow.
Murphy Anderson did it.
Wow.
He was able to hire like the guys that I'd grown up reading, kind of. So that was a
Yeah.
blast. Yeah,
God
yeah,
damn.
yeah.
That's
That was
awesome.
fun.
So you get to Dark Horse and what were you first doing over at Dark Horse?
Oh my God, all the horrible license crap. I mean, yeah, aliens and predators and
Sure.
terminators. Um, yeah, all the license books. Indiana Jones. Mike
Yes.
Richardson really wanted to, he really wanted that Star Wars license, and it was with Marvel. They weren't doing much of a job with it, early 90s, right? Nobody, they didn't care about licensed comics, right? Just the stuff that they own. It's very
Yep.
corporate thinking.
Sure.
We'll put our energy into what we own, and the stuff we don't, fuck it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was their attitude towards Star Wars. Richardson had a completely different attitude towards licensed books, which was the attitude that Bob and I had also brought with us from Comico. Um, and that was it stemmed from a love of the IP, and he loved aliens, and he got that license from 20th Century Fox. And I forget who wrote and drew those early issues, but it was painted artwork. There was a lot of effort and attention that went into the stories. I think Mark Verheiden might have been writing them.
Okay.
And
Sure.
uh, anyway, the work was good. It was
Yes.
not treated as, and so he had his eye on that Star Wars license. This was 92, and he managed to get Indiana Jones out of Lucas. And I was handed the first Indiana Jones miniseries to edit, and it was based on a computer game, which was kind of a newish thing at the
Sure.
time, like computer games with stories, as
Absolutely.
opposed to just like a Pac-Man kind of
Yeah,
thing.
pow pow, absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'm hip.
So, and the computer game had been written and, I don't know, put together by a guy named Hal Barwood, who was a film director who
Okay.
Bob was familiar with. I was not, of course. Um, but Hal became my connection for this Indiana Jones thing. And we were adapting the story of his computer game. And Mike, ordinarily editors hire their own creative teams, writers, artists. Mike got involved in this, and he hired his hero, Dan Barry, an old school newspaper strip
Oh yeah,
artist.
Flash Gordon, among other things that he had done.
Right.
Absolutely.
And so Dan Barry was my artist on this 4-issue
Wow.
Indiana Jones series.
Yeah.
And Dan was a crusty old guy, really old school. This was the 90s. There were still, early 90s, still not very many women working in publishing. And Dan, I was 35 or
Okay.
so, mid 30s, and Dan had no time for me,
Ah,
no at all. And you know,
yeah.
as is always the case with editing, I was caught between a rock and a hard place because I had Dan Barry, the famous, illustrious, tremendous artist Dan Barry on one side, and I had Lucasfilm on the other side in the person of Hal Barwood telling me, this is my baby, and he's not doing what I want.
Ooh.
And sorry, Dan, but you don't own this work. And this is a Lucasfilm thing. And really, Mike wants Star Wars. So if we fuck this up, that Mike is not going to be happy.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
Wow. Oh my God.
Anyway, Dan
And you're the
Barry,
person that has to give him the bad
and
news that
and
you're fucking up,
yes,
Dan.
yes, and you have to redraw this or whatever. And
Wow.
and Dan Barry was so rude and so mean to me that, and there was no email at this point. Yes, we had computers, but no email. Those are little box things, right? No email. And so I was on the phone with Dan every other day, trying to get the work out of him because he was also a deadline issue. And every time I was on the phone with Dan, I had to, by the end of the call, I had to get up, leave the office, walk around the block, and have a good cry because he was such a
Oh,
mean prick.
what an asshole. Yeah, man.
And it's like
Yeah.
it's terrible because this person is so talented and you really admire, you grew up with somebody, you admire his work, and it's so cool to work with him. And then he turns out to be a mean prick.
Yeah, fuck that guy.
And,
Absolutely.
and like really sexist, like just didn't want to hear from a
Little
young,
lady.
yeah,
Yeah. Fuck
yeah.
off, little lady. I've been doing this
Yeah,
for years. Who the hell
yeah,
are you?
exactly.
Yeah.
And you know what? Of course, now at age 71, when I'm dealing with a 20 or 30-year-old editor who, from my perspective, knows nothing, I get it, I get it. But I learned that lesson from Dan, and so I'm not a rude prick.
Atta
Um,
girl.
yeah, because you can't be,
Yeah.
you try to teach and and try to educate the person you're working with if there's stuff that they don't know, that they haven't been taught. But you don't, yeah, never, no one should ever be losing when you're trying to make something, create something great. Why on earth would you lose your temper either way? I've heard such terrible stories about Marvel and DC editors who like screamed at their creatives and why that it defeats the purpose, you know?
Of course. Well, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, again, I know from Gene Colan talking to him the few times that I did how pissed he was at Shooter. And yeah,
yeah,
man. And again, I mean, Jim is this complicated story because he got yelled at by Weisinger. So
right.
likely he was taking that example and also
Hmm.
was being yelled at Weisinger when he was 14.
Right.
So you
Yeah,
know, well, I guess
yeah,
this is how you get work done is you beat the bushes and you beat these
yeah,
guys up. And yeah,
yeah.
no, man. And again, especially artists that are free spirit people that I didn't get in the business to get yelled at by, you know, some henpecking boss and everything. So
Yeah,
no, I
yeah,
fucking get it.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. And you know, here's like I worked with Gene. I got to work with Gene too, uh, uh, on Escapist, on Michael
Oh yeah, the
Chabon's
Chiba stuff. Yeah, yeah,
Escapist
yeah.
adaptations, and also on the Harlan Ellison adaptations. And Gene he was a delight to work with. And you know, I had like he was my he could draw a romance comic like nobody's business, right? He was great. And so for me, I was working with the artist who used to draw those fantastic romance books for Marvel that I loved.
Sure.
And he was fantastic to work with. There's, you know, he was not a mean prick.
Of course not. No, he's a very sweet man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I
Yeah.
have a blade that I bought from him that is, and especially at the end when he was doing those great pencil
Yeah, yeah,
sketches and
yeah.
stuff. And it's truly one of my favorite pieces. And he was so kind to me because it really was like my first year in Word Balloon. And the recording didn't work when we talked, and I'm like, "Oh, Gene, oh, I'm
Oh
so sorry."
no.
And he's like, "Oh, John, I'll talk to you again. You're like Bob Costas. I like talking to you." And I'm like, okay, you're a wonderful man. God bless you. Thank you. Let me buy some art from you. You know, I mean, truly, I'm like, geez, that's the least I can do is buy something from you from your 4 hours of time when we got done and everything. You know, the Tuesday
Wow.
nights. So yeah, it was pretty
Yeah.
amazing.
And so
Mensch,
yeah, that's
Mensch.
exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God damn. Well,
Yeah.
who are some of the cool old timers that you got to work with?
Well, yeah, like I said, Jim Mooney, working with Jim
Yeah,
was just
that's
that
awesome.
was really fantastic for me because I had so loved his work growing up.
Sure.
Um, and you know, Jim Mooney actually he was one of there were two guys who, when I was 6 or 7, two artists that I could art spot, right? As a kid. And
Sure.
Mooney was one because his Supergirl was so distinctive to me that I knew, like, I didn't know his name because DC, there were no credits at
Right.
that point, right?
Right.
And but I knew if it was like sort of like the good artist, the good Supergirl artist, as opposed to the good Duck artist, the good
Yes.
Supergirl artist, um, or not. And so Mooney was one, and it would be later that I learned that, oh, this artist's name is Jim Mooney. I don't, you know, as a kid, I don't know how you were when you were reading comics as a kid, but did you, I didn't even much think about the fact that these things were written or drawn. It just wasn't kind of on my radar, you
Well, when I was
know?
a real little kid, yes, but it's funny because I really, as you say, especially specifically with Mooney, it was his faces that I really
Hmm.
appreciated, and really the
Hmm.
way he drew Kara, really just that those beautiful blue eyes and those faces. And I wasn't as much of a Marvel reader, so I didn't read his Spider-Mans that he
Hmm.
apparently was doing.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I know that I loved Swan, and especially when Murphy Anderson, but even if Tex Blaisdell or some of the others would ink him, I grew up on that Superman, starting with the look of the late 60s in reprints that were
Hmm.
coming out in the 70s,
Right,
but
right.
also that entire run until, you know, Julie stopped editing and Kurt stopped doing Superman.
Hmm.
So I was
Hmm.
a big Superman fan.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and then I would read when the credits were happening in mid to late 70s. Oh, Elliot Maggin, I like his stories. I like Carrie Bates's stories. I like Marty Pasco's stories.
Hmm.
You know,
Hmm.
so at first it was writers for me, but then
Yeah.
I did learn the artists. And then the great artists that subconsciously I kept going back to, but every time I did, I'm like, this guy's art is so ugly. Frank Robbins.
Oh,
But my
huh.
God, what
Wow.
a genius. And
Yeah.
then in the 90s, discovered his Johnny Hazard comic strips.
Right.
And
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this, I mean, and I used Bradstreet and I went to the same, we're in the same area for colleges. He went to
Tim.
Illinois Wesleyan, I
Huh.
went to Illinois State, but we would run into each other in the comic shops. So then when he, in the early 2000s, before I was even doing the podcast, I would see him at conventions. And then when I started the podcast, I'm like, Frank Robbins, man, I go, I hated those Invaders comics, but I kept buying them. And there was something about the art that was sticking in my head. And then, like I said, I discovered his comic strip work even more so. And it's like, oh, this guy's a fucking genius. My God.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so
Yeah.
yeah, so yeah, eventually I wised up, but probably not till my teen years. Probably not.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
Well,
yeah, you know,
yeah. I don't know. I comics were just these things with fantastic stories, and I was involved in them,
yeah,
and but I just wasn't really thinking about who wrote them or drew them, and without credits, why would I even
sure.
think? Except to notice that, oh, I don't like this Supergirl. This is not the right one, you know.
And for me, especially the 50s and 60s Superman, as much as again I respect his work, Wayne Boring never did it for
Oh,
me as a
yeah,
Superman
yeah,
artist.
yeah.
Everybody was too fat. Everybody was too heavy.
Yeah,
You
yes,
know, and
yeah.
it's funny because you watch the George Reeves show, and all the gangsters were fat, heavy
They're
guys
right.
too.
Yeah.
So I think he was kind of aping what was on the TV
Yeah,
show.
you're that's a good point. I think you're right. Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think you're alone in not being a big Wayne Boring fan. So, yeah.
But there are those that again those that love the golden and silver age, well more so the silver age, that they love him and stuff. God, I was just talking to Bob Rozakis about the 100-page spectaculars from the 70s, and I'm like, God, it was such an education seeing this stuff and reading the reprints and
Hmm.
getting to know the writers and artists that way.
Yeah.
And so that was a really great thing because the 80-page giants too, but I was a little too little, and they occasionally I'd get a hand-me-down 80-page giant. But my era really started in 72.
In 70s. Yeah.
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 So that's when I was really like my 50 cent allowance would buy me two 20-cent comics, a week.
Yeah. So yeah, and I was about a dozen years before you.
Yeah, that's
And
cool.
I think I heard, I listened to an interview with you a few days ago, with a Canadian on a Canadian show. It was the year after the pandemic, so it was 21. Um, is it Giants of the True North? Something about the
Oh, I know.
North.
Yeah, the True North podcast. Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind. They
And
they had me on their show. Yes.
yeah, and so I was listening to you on the show, and you said, and this really struck me, I think it's very true, that what you grow up with is sort of forever the gold standard for you, and no matter how bad it might really be if you
Yes,
put on your critic lens,
totally.
but yeah, I mean, this is what sparked our passion, right?
Absolutely. My God. It's so funny. You're right because even I checked out in I was reading through college because Watchmen and Dark Knight and the black and white boom brought me back in the 80s. But then in the 90s, when I was out in the workforce, couldn't really afford comics, and
Hmm.
also I absolutely respect what happened with the Image Revolution, but I can't deny that it was art first, story second in that era, even at the big two,
Hmm.
and that kind of turned me off. And also the variant covers and all that bullshit.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah,
know.
I'm like,
And we're right back in there.
we
I
are,
mean, yeah,
we are.
I
I know.
know.
But again, I whatever. That's the direct market, and I thankfully the writing matches the art. I think for the most part. I mean,
Yeah.
did you see what Todd McFarlane said recently about art and writing? He said, and he's not wrong, that a great artist can. I mean, I'll put it nicely. A great artist can elevate a shitty script. He's not
True.
wrong about that. But I mean, he really was like, hey, you could have Michelangelo draw your comic, and my dog could write it, and you'd still buy it. Conversely, if William Shakespeare wrote the comic and my mother drew it, nobody's going to want to read it. And he's
Yeah,
not wrong,
yeah,
but I do think that we are at a balance period where the art and the story are appreciated equally.
a much better balance. I mean, and yeah, I think you can point pretty specifically to certain writers who helped make that shift, Alan being one of them,
Sure.
Christopher another. I mean,
Christopher who, buddy?
Claremont, sorry.
Oh, Chris
And,
Claremont. Sure.
yeah, thinking of,
Yeah,
they in
but
the early 80s again with X-Men, and I are at Comics and Comics, we hosted Chris and the hundreds of people who were there for him, for the writer, and that was a new, it was a kind of a new thing. So and
it felt like though because it was that Image '90s period that turned me off, and I came back around 98, 99 when
hmm
Bendis was doing Powers, when
hmm
Rucka and Brubaker were on the Batman books, things
hmm
like that. And then I discovered their creator-owned stuff as well, more so like
right.
Bendis with Powers and things like I said. But he was doing Ultimate Spider-Man back then, and yeah, so that I'm like, oh, and I had heard through the grapevine, hey, Kevin Smith's doing Daredevil, and it's almost as good as when Miller was doing it, and I'm like, well, I
It was
loved when
pretty
Miller was.
good.
Yeah,
It
I'm
was
like, all
pretty
right,
good.
I'll check it out. And while I was
hmm
there, I saw the other titles, and I'm like, oh, let me see what's going on, and it pulled me back in. And then, like I said, in '05, I was being unsatisfied in my broadcast career. And I'm like, well, is anyone going to mind if I start talking about comic books? And they're like, why would we? I'm like, well, I don't want you to think conflict of interest, but let me start a podcast. And yeah, that's kind of, I mean, yeah.
I,
So about 5 years being back, that brought me to the podcast.
and like, what were your models for podcasts? I don't
None.
remember
None.
podcasts.
None, buddy. Honestly, Jonah Weiland at CBR, Comic Book Resources, was doing an occasional interview and posting them on the website, but podcasting was brand new. There was an article in,
Websites were brand new, for God's sakes.
yeah, reasonably so. Yeah, only a few years. I mean, again, this is 2005 when I started the podcast, but Wired Magazine in February of '05 is
hmm
like, hey, podcasting, audio entertainment. There were a
Uh,
couple attempts prior to that where I would see, um, I'm forgetting the name of QuickTime. They would have QuickTime video or QuickTime
oh, right,
audio,
right, right.
and
Yeah,
it'd be postage stamp
right,
video
right.
size. Exactly. She knows what I'm talking about, everybody. So yeah, and we all do if we're old enough to remember, 25 years ago what the internet was like. But yeah, I'm like, okay, this is an opportunity to generate because I was more behind the scenes in my radio career at that point, and I'm like, I like hosting, I like interviewing. This is not a platform where I can do that,
hmm
and again, just for the fun of it, and also with no lofty, I'm going to do this for comics, but I'm like, hey, I like the product right now. And more people need to treat it the same way that authors and filmmakers and television makers are being respected. Because again, this was like 99, 2000. So
hmm hmm
Sopranos and a lot of the great television that now people look at the start of the good television we're getting now.
Right, right.
I'm like, well, comics are doing it as well. And nobody's talking to these guys. Or if they are, it's 2 minutes at the end of Entertainment Tonight. Hey,
Mm.
look, there's a new comic thing. And they're making a movie out of it. And that was the other thing that inspired me. This is when Batman Begins and Road to Perdition and Sin
hmm
City were all
hmm
coming out. And it's like, well, rather than talk to the adaptation people that are taking these comics and making film and TV, let's go to the source. Let me talk to Max
Right,
Collins, Max Allen
right.
Collins about Road to Perdition, and let
hmm
me talk to Batman people and the
hmm
like.
hmm
And
hmm
and thankfully there were so few of us. I'd use George Burns's joke. We were all in the top 10. There were only 8 of us as far as comedians.
Well, but it was really forward thinking of you. I
Dumb
mean,
luck, buddy. Seriously. I
yeah.
honestly, hey, I think this would be good. I mean, really, I am not the brightest bulb in the box and never claimed to be.
But
But
yeah,
right place, right time. you know?
Yeah, and it's not dumb to see luck and know how to make that work, you
Again,
know.
yeah. Well, every now and then I make the right turn. Are we cool with time? I mean, there's still more I want to talk about, but I also don't want to wear you out.
I'm as you wish.
God bless you, buddy. All right, cool. Because
Um,
truly, I could
I
chop
want
this up into episodes easily.
I want to hear about Bendis because
What do you
you
want to
were
know?
well, you were early with Brian. Or at least I mean, when you started podcasting,
Yeah,
uh, if I'm remembering from the interview, Brian was really supportive right from the start.
he was. He was.
So when did you connect with Brian? How did
Sure.
that work?
Well, in '05, when I started, um, I went to the local Wizard Chicago show, and I had a bunch of my first interviews were with people like Jeff Parker,
Yeah.
and not only talking about his early work, and he was just getting his feet wet at Marvel, but also his Inner Man creator-owned hero that he had. Mark Andreyko was an early person, and then locally we had Moonstone Comics. So I talked to
Wait, Moonstone or Moondog?
Moonstone, not the
Oh,
stores,
okay.
Moonstone,
Oh,
which
all right. A publishing, right. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and they had
Oh,
like
yeah. Right. I remember.
the Phantom license, and they also
Hmm.
licensed
Yeah.
Kolchak the Night Stalker. Big
Right.
fan of both of those. So I'm like, all right, let me talk to those
Huh.
guys. So I took a bunch of my interviews to that Wizard show, and I handed out digital CDs with MP3 files on it, and I explained to them, all right, you're not gonna be able to pop this in your CD player and immediately play them. You're gonna have to put them on your hard drive and pull them there. But I handed them to Bendis and
Huh.
Brubaker and Greg Rucka and people like that. And I think Brian was intrigued by the new technology,
Mm-hmm.
and thankfully I had at that point. So this is 2005. I started in radio in the 80s in 85 as far as professionally, but I had college
Mm-hmm.
radio before that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of knew how to do an interview reasonably well. And also my decade plus at the in sports radio
Mm-hmm.
interviewing athletes and stuff. I'm like, all right, I kind of know what I'm doing. So yeah, I'm just like, hey, this is what I do professionally, CBS radio, the like, whatever. But I have this podcast. Would you talk to me? And I think the novelty of it being so brand new, everybody was willing to talk. And again, like I say, with no pride or anything, there are only a few of us doing comic book podcasts, and even less actually interviewing them, and also knowing how to do an interview reasonably well and not
Right.
just be, the Chris Farley show. As far as when if you remember the SNL sketches with him and how he would kind of awkwardly interview people. Yeah. So yeah, I was kind of lucky, and thankfully, God, Brian was like, "This is great," and he told the bosses at Marvel,
Hmm.
"Talk to this guy because he knows what he's
Huh.
doing." And that was an incredible leg up from everybody else. So
Yeah.
Marvel and DC was always corporate. DC was like, well, you got to do this. We got to have one of our marketing people on the call with you. I'm like,
Right.
whatever,
Yeah.
and fine. I got through it, and slowly built trust. And I always have to emphasize this: the people at DC now in marketing, they understand, they appreciate it, and I can work very easily with both DC and Marvel, with no problem. But yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
yeah, no, Brian was really a great advocate, and not only to the bosses, but to his writing and art peers, and
Mm-hmm.
saying,
Mm-hmm.
"Talk to
Yeah.
John; he knows what he's doing." So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then we really, yeah, we just became friends that way, and we had a weird marathon, kind of like what we're doing now, where he's like, "Hey, I got like 100 questions on my message board," and he goes, "I thought it'd be easier just to kind of go through them on a podcast." I'm like, "Whatever you want, man. Let's do it."
Yeah.
And
Huh.
so we started doing that, and he was great. No, he was incredibly kind, and I owe a lot to Brian.
And what's the book thing that you
I
guys are
think
doing?
I'm just going to
Don't
transcribe, and
no
I
no,
want to.
but aren't you and Brian doing a book club kind of?
Oh, the book club, sure. Yes. Yeah. Again, you see, he's like, how can I help you? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm like, you're already helping me. You come on the show. And he goes, well, on my Discord, because he's teaching writing as well, and he goes,
I he yeah
as you know.
I offered him that, but I'll tell you about that.
Oh, that's great. Because yes, and I know beyond that. Well, and we'll get to that. But I know you've guest lectured for his course and everything and things, which is great.
And vice versa,
That's
which is,
wonderful.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
wonderful. Well, yeah,
So
he's like
go
so.
on. So
Yeah, so we do. I mean, it's in the commercials. Everybody's watching right now or hears the show. It's like, yeah, we know. But Diana doesn't know, so you'll forgive me, everybody. So yeah, we try monthly. Sometimes it's semi-monthly. We pick a book and we just do an online book club, and it's great because if when you see the commercial on the TV show, you see the Zoom, and there literally is like 25 of us there, and I kind of like showing it that way
oh, that's cool.
so that everyone is on on camera, and everyone just kind of says what they think about the book. And the last one we did was Darwin Cook, the first volume of his Parker adaptation.
Oh yeah, yeah, those are great.
Which
Yeah,
yeah, and there's
yeah.
one of my great regrets. I got to know Darwin a bit at conventions, and we always
Mhm.
talked about doing a
Oh
podcast,
my
and
God.
then sadly
You
he got
didn't.
sick, and we
Yeah,
never did it. And
yeah.
that's a regret. Joe Kubert is a regret of a guy that was very sweet to me, but I
Yeah.
missed my opportunity. I never really got close enough to Stan to make the deal happen. And
Hmm.
that's all right.
Hmm.
What do you? Denny O'Neil was great. Came on many times.
Oh, good.
Marty Pasco came on many times.
Hmm.
Neil even Adams came on a few times and everything. So yeah, I again coming in '05 when there were so few doing it, it was enough of a novelty that I mean, I would even explain and go, it's kind of like internet radio and everything. And again, luckily being reasonably adept at what I do,
Hmm.
could conduct a decent interview. So yeah, thankfully word spread, and again, but I like I said, I always shit on the Brian, a shit ton. He's a good friend. He really has become
He's
an amazing guy.
yeah, he is a good guy. It, I was trying to remember how he and I first met, but
Totally, yeah.
it was in the Comico days. It was
Oh
before
wow,
Dark
that
Horse.
that
So it
early.
was late 80s.
Wow.
And I want to say he was doing work for Caliber at that
Yes,
time. He had
yes.
just begun doing work for Caliber. And uh and I we ran into each other at conventions. And there had been some talk about getting him on a Grendel. Um, but I don't know, it didn't pan out. Um, and but we became friends in 2000, and this I remember very clearly because I mean, we would see each other at shows. Hello, hello.
Sure, sure.
But in 2000, we were both invited uh, to a couple of conventions on the other side of the planet. So the first was in Sydney, Australia,
Cool.
and the next week was in Auckland, New Zealand. And they flew people there, and then you did both conventions, and
Yes.
you got to see Sydney, you got to see Auckland, and Brian was there, I was there. And so that's where I remember first having, sort of friendly conversations. The first Powers trade had just been published. He handed that to me, and I read it once I got home and flipped for it. I hadn't read the issues. Um, anyway, so became a strong Powers fan. But based on that, you know, few days in Sydney and few days in Auckland, um, I got a phone call out of the blue, and this was in 2001, summer of, I don't know, before 9/11. A
Okay.
phone call from Brian saying, "Would you mind? My wife Elisa is going to be out in Portland in another week on such and such a day, and would you drive her around the city to look at neighborhoods because we want to move there and buy a house?" So I don't feel that I knew Brian well enough for that at the time, but it was just sort of really forthright and friendly. And of course, why wouldn't I do that? Of course I would, you know. Um, so it was that was the moment at which he and I really connected and became friends. And they bought a house like 10 blocks away from my house.
Cool. Yeah.
But the teaching thing, I started teaching in 2002,
Yes.
and um, and I've had Brian come into my classes from time to time. And he was, well, you know how he is. He's great. He's very engaging. The students loved him.
Oh, yeah.
And 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 then in 2008 or 2009, I got a phone call from Portland State University writing department, and they wanted me to come in and teach a course in comics writing. And I said, this is Portland. We have the best writers of comics, the best selling and best writers of comics living here right now. Why would you ask an editor to come in and teach a course in writing comics? I said, let me make a few phone calls and I'll get back to you. And Brian was the first person I called and said, what about teaching? Have you thought about teaching? And it took him about 3 minutes to just say, hell yeah. And he has been teaching ever since. And I've guested in his classroom a few times. So and in fact, his first course, he, in a panic, send me your syllabus. I don't know how to make a syllabus, and I have to make a
Been there.
syllabus. Yeah.
I taught for one semester, and yes,
Oh,
I'm like, all right, I don't know how to build a syllabus or anything other than what
and
I know and what I could convey.
and that's what we do, right? I mean, it was, I started teaching because in 2001, Will Eisner had come back from, I think it was Ohio State University, and I was Will's editor at Dark Horse, and we were on the phone a lot. And he said to me, "My God, Diana, I can't believe it. They're teaching a course at the university called Comics as Literature." Now, in 2001, that was a big, big deal. And Will was so impressed. He knew I had a master's degree. And he said, why don't you take that fancy degree? To Will, any degree was fancy, right? A smart guy, but could never have afforded to go to
Yeah, he was a street guy. He
college.
learned he
Yeah.
learned working in the shops and everything.
Yep,
Absolutely.
exactly right. Um, Take that fancy degree and go teach a course in comics. And Will Eisner tells you to do something,
Fucking
you
do it.
you fucking do it. Yeah. So I did. And sold myself to, and just then that was it. And now, of course, we have a comic studies program at Portland State. We have another comic studies program at University of Oregon in Eugene. So it's kind of, and I see it spreading everywhere. It's really, really fantastic. But when I had to make my first syllabus,
Talk to me.
I
Yeah.
I contacted Charles Hatfield. Charlie Hatfield. Charles is at University of, no, California State University at Northridge. But Dr. Charles Hatfield, was Charlie Hatfield, who wrote letters of comment to Johnny Quest and
Oh wow.
Grendel.
Crazy.
And so, and
Letterhead. Yeah.
yes, as I had been, and I knew Charles because of this, and knew that he was a teacher. So I contacted him and said, comics syllabus.
How do I
And
do this?
that's just how we do it, right? We go to our friends and say, help. So
That's so goddamn great. And also, I love that when you step back from doing that, that you handed it over to Shelly. And is Shelly still doing it?
Shelley is still doing it, yes. And I mean, the the last year, I taught a variety of courses
Tell me. Yeah.
throughout my 20 years, but the last year, I developed a comics editing course, and there had not been one there, to my knowledge. There is no other comics editing course.
Really, not even
being
like
taught.
like Savannah or
I
School of
don't
Visual Arts or anything like that. No.
not that I have ever heard
Okay.
of.
Okay.
Could be wrong. Would love to hear if I am wrong because would love
Sure.
to know about this.
Yeah.
But anyway, I sat down and figured out, what kinds of things would I want to get across in a 10-week course.
Wow.
Um, and but that was also my last year of I had put in 20 years and translation was happening and teaching was taking more and more out of me, and I was already in my late 60s, and so it was enough. I knew that I was going. And Shelley, of course, who had been my assistant editor at Comico the last year or two there, um, it, she and I had stayed in touch, and she was my immediate first choice, and hoping that she would agree to take it over. And of course, as it turns out, she had been writing at that point her textbook. Um, in fact, it was not yet published when I taught my editing course, but it was in process. So she agreed to let me use a chapter, which I used with my students. The year I taught that course, Shelley, in fact, guest lectured. We did a Zoom thing, and she guest lectured. And she was, yeah, she was the perfect person to come in and take that over. And since the pandemic taught us all that we can teach online, she did not have to be living here in Portland to do the job either. So that worked out really well. And as she came in, her book was published. And so she had a ready-made textbook. And for those who don't know, I mean, this is the first and only comics editing textbook that there is. There are
Bad
no
grammar, I want
others.
to say. Isn't it bad grammar? Is that the title of it?
Filth and Grammar is the
Filth
name
and
of
Grammar,
it.
excuse me.
Filth
Okay.
and Grammar. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
She's been on to
and
talk about it, obviously. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And subsequently, she's like a writing machine now. She's got three more. I just got the most recent book called I, Doppelganger,
Yes.
um, which sort of covers Shelley's years in New York, her time at DC Vertigo. Yeah, she's been doing a lot of writing. Prior to that, there was a graphic novel about her time as a young camper, just going off to camp when you're 10 years old or whatever. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's fantastic. She has recreated herself within the comics industry while she's still freelance editing. She has
Yes.
become a writer as well. And
Did.
yeah, it's great to see. She's, the I might actually have said this when she and I were on together on your show together, that there's no greater reward really than when you see the student become the master. And I feel that very strongly in the case of Shelley,
No question. No question. Are you gonna
It's
turn on a light? There
there.
you
How's that?
go. I know. I know. It's dark by me, obviously, 2 hours ahead of you. But no, I appreciate it, buddy. There you go. Hey, it's Diana Schutz.
I didn't realize, I'm
No, no,
looking
you're
at
good.
you. I'm
It
not really,
literally, it literally was happening in the last like minute or so
right.
that you suddenly became a 60 Minutes insider that didn't want to reveal your identity to me. So let's blow the lid off the cigarette companies, Diana, and talk about cancer and its effects on people.
Oh, yeah.
You
Well,
know, whistleblower.
you're talking to an ex-smoker, so
I did not know that. Well, that's all
yeah.
right. I'm a
Yes.
pothead, so don't sweat it, Diana. You're
Yeah.
talking. You're in friendly territory. Don't worry.
Uh, well, yeah, I
It's
smoke.
legal here, so I don't mind saying that.
It's
And I
legal
know it's
here.
legal by you
It's
as
legal
well.
here too.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah, I can't smoke pot. I am one of those people who gets really, I don't know, freaked out, paranoid.
Oh, I understand. No,
Yeah. Yeah.
believe me, I respect. Rum did that for me. So and
Really?
also, well, and Dad owned a bar and then pizzeria. So he wasn't like, he wasn't free about it, but like alcohol wasn't a big deal to me or my
Hmm.
sister.
Hmm.
So yeah, we never became drinkers. And she to this day, like a little bit of wine, but that's it. And she never got into pot. But yeah, sadly, again, hanging out with the ex hippies at the rock station and everything, and also in college. I'll admit, college is kind of where it happened for me.
Oh, yeah, me too. I
But
mean,
yeah, we were all surprised when they legalized it in Illinois as early as we figured we'd be in our 70s, and then finally maybe it would happen. So yeah, we were a couple of years ago when it happened. Me and my friends are like, "Yay!"
so just, yeah, only 2 years ago, huh? In Illinois. I,
No, a little more than that. It was right after the pandemic. So like 21 or 22, I want to
okay.
say, is when
Hmm.
it legalized. So about 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
But and I'll admit I was buying from friends that were selling and stuff on the
Hmm.
sly. Again, but it was great going to Portland. Hun, God bless you. Truly, you guys are lucky because if I lived by you, I would be the thing that didn't leave and I'd be over all the time. Because truly, I
Well,
could
you have a
honestly,
lot of friends here.
I really do, Diana. I truly do. And that's, I always say, if I could pick up and move, I'd move to Portland in a heartbeat and see all of you on a regular basis. And you would be like, all right, somebody tell John to leave because
I
he
don't
doesn't
think
seem to be
so.
getting the
I don't
hint.
think so.
All right.
But it is, we are, I mean, that's another thing that's been really interesting to watch because New York was the hub. In 2016, the Oregon Historical Society declared Portland Comic City, USA, and we are. I mean,
Yes.
in 1990, when Mike Richardson moved Bob and me to Portland, there was nothing happening here. Marvel inker Randy Emberlin was here.
Okay.
Uh, Master of Kung Fu artist Paul Galassi was
Sure.
here.
Love Paul. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, that's about it, I want
Wow.
to say. And it really was the advent of Dark Horse, the creation of Dark Horse as a publishing company, which I got to tell you, John, when Mike moved us here, Dark Horse was 10 people working out of one big room. It was, that the company could have gone either way. We had no idea. And we were fresh off the Comico bankruptcy. So we had no idea really how it could go. But that was, Mike bringing us on board with our experience in comics publishing because no one else at Dark Horse had any experience.
Mike was a store owner before creating the company.
Mike, correct, and he owned a comic store, and um, and had worked in graphic design. So, but no one else had worked in publishing. Um, Chris Warner had drawn comics, and I think Randy Stradley had written a story or two for Marvel, but no one had any outside experience until Bob and I were brought in.
Wow.
And and that was the beginning that coincided with we were brought in like the year after the Aliens license was signed, I think, and Sin City was no, first it was the Martha Washington Give Me Liberty book,
Sure. Yes.
was just had been signed but was just starting to be published
Miller
as
and
we
Gibbons, everybody.
yeah,
Yeah.
Miller and Gibbons, that's right. And then Sin City began in 91. Um, and Bob and I, yeah, were hired in March of 1990. So Dark Horse was just at its initial growing point when we were hired, and it just ballooned from there. Um, this in-house staff, within 3 years, we were up to 40 people. So that like times, quadruple growth in just a couple of years, really. Um, and as the company grew, and then, of course, when Bob left in 96, and at the end of 96 and in 97, formed Oni Press with Joe Nosmak, it, again, now we had two publishing companies, except in fact, we had three because Top Shelf was located here. The original Top Shelf, Brett Warnock's, a very independent publishing company, was here. Brett was here. And as the companies grew and Portland was a cheap place to live, people, more and more creators began moving here. Plus, we were hiring editors from outside. So we were bringing in more people to the companies themselves. And yeah, the difference between 1990 and 2000, 2001, when the Bendises moved here, is just remarkable. The number of cartoonists, creators, comics people in general. And now, you can't walk down the block without bumping into a fellow comics colleague, I guess, in this town. We're sick with with us. So yeah.
In 2018, I went to Rose City.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, we saw each other, and again, this is, buddy, this is 7 years ago, so I don't blame you for not,
Yeah.
And again, we've occasionally run
20,
into each other face to
2018
face.
is when we bought this house and moved. So
Oh,
that year is a blur for me. Yeah.
understood. Sure, sure. But it was crazy. And Brian is like, well, you're gonna stay with us. And I'm like, oh no, no, no. And thankfully Elisa's like, you're staying with us. He means it. And I'm like, and she's like, I mean it. And I'm like, all right,
Uh,
well, that's really kind. Thank you. But
by then they were in the big house behind Cosmic Monkey.
yes.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Bendis Manor, Wayne Manor. I mean,
Right.
because
Right.
he's like, we got the room, man. You got it. He goes,
Yeah.
Mac stays with us for weeks and everything. I'm like, all right, fine. So it was really sweet. But I spent the day at Helioscope because of Parker
Oh,
and,
good.
and then Steve and everything and the guys. So and then Coover and Tobin. So it was really great to see them.
Yeah.
And then at the show itself, because I ended up staying like from Wednesday to Sunday.
Oh, good.
And yeah, so it was really, because I said, I'm like, do you mind? Can I? He's like, of course. Because I'm like, beyond the show, I really kind of want to experience Portland because I heard about Powell's and how cool of a bookstore that is.
So you
Oh,
went to
fuck yeah.
Powell's Books?
Oh,
Yeah.
shit. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
It was great.
That is a total destination point for this
Yeah.
town. Yeah.
And Voodoo Donuts and all the shit
Mhm.
and everything, and the food trucks and all the bullshit. So, no, it was great. And it was wonderful to experience it. But then, yeah, it was so wonderful being there. You were set up next to the brothers of Gabriel and Fabio.
Oh, right. I remember. And you probably went to the diffraction house that after the
No, I,
show.
I actually didn't because I was getting a flight Sunday night. And they're like,
Oh,
oh, John, we're going to have this big
yeah.
dinner Sunday. And I'm like, I got to go.
Oh, that's too bad. And
Instead.
I bailed that night too.
Did you?
I
Okay.
was beat after that.
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. And that's the other thing, and
Yeah.
I know for the dead dog parties in San Diego, it's like, that's why they're called the dead dog parties. Absolutely, man. But no,
Although,
it was so great because you're set up next to the brothers, and I had them on only once, and either I can't remember if it was Gabriel or Fabio, and they're like, "Have we done your show?" And I'm like, "Yes, you did once." And they're like, "Okay." I'm like, "I want you back." I'm like, "All right, when there's something good, we'll come back." I'm like, "All right, no problem." But no, you were a doll. You were incredibly cool, and again, I mean, no, you're right. I mean, like I said, Parker and Chris and Allison, although Allison just moved to DC. So,
right.
yeah, everybody, no, it's like I do have a dozen or so people that I'm friendly with that it's like, no, if I ever were to move, Mark Russell, a newer friend, but
Right.
yeah, it's like, oh God, no, I would absolutely pick up and move and come by because I can do this anywhere. But I
Yeah.
still got family here and everything, and especially a few of the old timers that I want to still be close to and everything before,
Makes
you
a
know,
difference. That's, when Bob went to work at DC in 99,
yeah, tell me.
eh, that was a big reason for him to move back to New York. I mean, who knew that Bob would fall in love with Portland, Oregon? He was a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker. Uh, uh, he- Always, for as long as I had known him to that point, I considered him a New Yorker at heart. But when we moved here, and despite, we divorced about a year later, the
Okay.
move was tough on us, on our relationship. And but despite all the emotional upset and everything else, he fell in love with Portland. And so when DC ended, when his employment there, when that ended, he came back to Portland. Who'd have thunk? I'm so glad, Um,
That's
this
great that you guys are still friendly and everything post
well,
divorce. I'm really glad.
we had to be. I mean, in 91, which is when we split up, Dark Horse was a company of 15 people. So either one of us was going to have to leave that job or we were going to have to figure it the fuck out. And we
Yeah.
opted for the latter, and I'm glad because I mean, Bob and I were friends before we were lovers, and there was every reason to preserve that. So, um, but yeah, in 99, Denny O'Neil, I got the call from Denny, who wanted to retire, and he offered me the Batman franchise. And just in
Wow.
99, what I mean, my heart was in independent comics. What the fuck did I want with Batman? Um, Yeah, I didn't. And given
Memories of the 4 days in Marvel, like God forbid I do this again.
exactly right. And going back to New York in 99, I was 44. So, New York is a great town when you're 20, but not so much as you're getting older, I don't think. And plus, yeah, I was 10 minutes from the Dark Horse office. Uh, I did not want to go back to being a commuter. Lots of reasons for me not to go there. And as I said to Denny, well, wait, my sister is here, my brother-in-law, Matt, is here, and Bob is here. And he said to me, well, Bob is the next person on my list to call. And which, yeah, of course, that made
Wow.
sense. That made sense. Um, and in fact, Bob was in a flurry over this because Oni was 2 years in, and they were doing well,
Yeah, they were up and coming. Sure.
that could have gone any which way as well.
Yeah.
He did not have health insurance, and that worried the shit out of me. Um, but he had family in New York. He had
Oh,
aging parents on
there you
Long
go.
Island.
Sure.
And so right there, that was reason for him to take the job. Plus lots of money, good
Yeah.
bank for the years that he was there. And he did some fantastic work at DC. He brought all the independent writers in there to work on these established icons,
Yes.
icons of the industry. And
Yes.
it worked out beautifully.
Indeed.
So, yeah.
No, I truly, yeah, I was very aware of what Trek was doing over there, and really loved, and truly, it's great to talk to yourself and Bob and other editors. And it took like DC was very militant about no fucking way. They're like, no, you don't talk to editors. I'm like, okay, and it was so,
Really?
yeah, it was
Wow.
weird. Meanwhile, Marvel's like, hey, talk to whoever the hell you want. I'm like, great. The only guy that turned me down was Buckley because he's like, John, I'm going to say something, and I know you're cool, but I'll inadvertently say something that will bite me in the ass with the stockholders 3 months later.
Right.
And in fact, it happened with DiDio, where
Huh.
DiDio revealed, and of all things, it was Batlash, and he's like, "Oh, we're gonna do Batlash," and I forget who's gonna write it and draw it, and Levitz is like, "Hey, what the fuck are you doing telling him about Batlash? We haven't even started the marketing thing." And I'm like,
Oh,
all right, sorry, man. Again,
yeah.
I certainly don't want
Yeah.
to fuck anything up for anybody. And truly, especially, and this is good that we're pre-recording because a lot of times when I am live, like everyone, I think everyone gets it by now, and they're smart to like, well, I'd love to tell you X, but I can't. And I'm like, hey, I don't need to be first with news. I just want a good conversation. You don't have to break news on my show. If you want to, great. But I don't care. You've got enough of a career, even newcomers. I'm like, don't fuck up your job. I don't want anyone to fuck up their job talking to me. God
Yeah,
damn.
but By the same token, I mean, I remember as Dark Horse grew, it sort of became increasingly professional. And at some point, whoever was running the marketing department, that was a little like a merry-go-round. There were so many people coming on and off, it seemed, but whoever was running the marketing department was like, no, you're anything that you say to anyone, any of the press, any of the comics press has to be cleared by us first.
Yeah.
And to which my response was, yeah, I don't
God
think
bless you,
so.
buddy. You're
Yeah.
damn right. You're goddamn right.
Yeah. So,
Well,
and that
yeah,
kind of protectionism is, again, it's corporate thinking. It lacks individualism. People are not allowed to be people. Everything, I don't know. I mean, the Dark Horse website has a history section which mentions nobody but for Mike, and and it's worded it's worded in such a way that it gives you the impression that Dark Horse was the first independent publishing company, which is not true, which is just flat out not true.
yes.
And Mike has done so much for so many people that he just doesn't need to take credit for what he didn't do. You know
I'm
what
not,
I mean?
I do. I do.
So, but I think at some point companies eh, they get away from you,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they become their own entity almost. And it's at that point that an editor gets told everything you say must be cleared by like they own you or some fucking thing. And yeah,
I'm hip.
yeah.
No, really, again, I'm in a really good place with DC, and I know who to ask about and who not to as far
Hmm.
as editorial. But no, in those years, when I would kind of fight with the other guys that were marketing and stuff, thankfully the creators got big enough that there was like, I'm talking to John because I trust John. He's not going to fuck us up. And that was the great thing about that's what earlier on when we were talking about Brian Bendis. It was like, no, John's cool. He's not gonna blow anything. And it was really great to hear from Buckley, the publisher. And it's like,
Hmm.
I know you're not going to blow any marketing thing that we have planned. And I'm like, yeah, because again, I just want a good conversation. And fine, when the news comes out, then I'll talk about it.
Yeah,
Then I'll have that
yeah,
interview and everything.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it took a long time to explain to the powers that be at DC. It's like, no. And then it would get to the point where a creator like a Tom King would be doing DC books, but also be doing Dark Horse books or wherever his books were also being published. And it would be a game, and I'd be like, well, how about I have Tom King on and he doesn't say shit about DC? How would that be for you? Well, we
Yeah.
don't want that. I'm like, you're goddamn right, you don't want that.
Right. Yeah.
So, and
Yeah.
again, not the people that are there now, they get it, but the other people, I would have to be. And again, also having years in sports radio where I would deal with the same bullshit, talking to athletes and PR people, and it's
Hmm.
like,
Hmm.
hey, you're not the first. Again, thankfully, my broadcast experience, and also it's like it's a big comic book world. You don't want me to talk to your people? I'll talk to the other publishers and
Yeah.
the other creators. I
Yeah.
don't think you want that.
Right.
So,
And
and
it's
again,
sure
not me. It's not me. It's just anybody. And it's thankfully having been around long enough, it is like, look, all I do is help you sell books by these interviews. I
that's
think you
right.
want that.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
and luckily they get it now. Everybody gets
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
So that's cool. Crazy woman. This is what I'm saying.
And it sure is a big comic book world now. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
wow.
amazing. Yeah.
Be careful what you wish for.
Well, I know. And really, I mean, like, again, I'm glad you're finding the gigs that you're finding now. We talked earlier about, you work with the guys in Chicago that are doing the cool books and everything, and I think that's great. Um, yeah, I don't know. I mentioned to you before we started recording AI. Uh, how do you feel
Yeah.
about AI and the people that are using it for art and things and writing help and things like that?
You know, I I have mixed feelings. It's just a tool like any other tool, but we've all read the science fiction horror stories, right? And
Oh God, yeah.
so we can't help but kind of be influenced by that view of the dominant machine. I think it's a tool. If we're careful with how we use it,
Sure.
then it can be tremendously helpful. I
Indeed.
find it, now if I have questions when I'm translating something, and particularly, and you're aware of this because of the work that you did, and English is such a rich language. There are many, many different ways of conveying a particular meaning, a certain meaning. And so you have your choice of vocabulary, sentence structure, kind of tonal variations,
Indeed.
voice, and
Yes.
all this stuff. So, it's not like given a foreign text and three different translators, you're going to get three different translations into English. It's not just a one-to-one kind of rigid correspondence of word to word. That's not how it works at all. And so when I'm doing this stuff, when I'm essentially writing in English, rewriting a book in English is what it feels like. Um, yeah, I'll have questions. The book that I'm working on now, In Search of Lost Tintin,
Hmm.
there are references to other cartoonists and things that they've published, and sometimes well, does that sound right? Is that actually right? With the Black Sad books that we've translated,
Yes.
those guys they're fantastic, but they are, as happens when you become really, really good at your work, editorial oversight gets lessened.
Yes.
People don't watch you as closely, and there's a reason for that. You trust those people to
Certainly.
do
Of
to do
course.
their job. But by the same token, I've found mistakes before, sometimes in the art, sometimes in the script, things that have been published in French by Dargaud, who is their publisher of record, in Spanish by Planeta, Spanish being its original language of scripting, and things have just gone through that should not have, that an editor uh,
Interesting.
doing their job should have caught.
Wow.
And because I am an editor and I can't take that out of my translation work, is
Sure.
just who I am.
Yeah.
If I find stuff like that, I will fix it for the English translation. But that means I often have questions about things, just research type questions. Was this really published when the person said it was? I don't know, whatever. Come up with any question. Wow, my browser's AI is a saving grace right there. If I have questions, they tend to have answers for me,
You
and
just,
that's very helpful.
yeah, you just have to double check facts because truly,
Yeah,
because and I have a dear friend that is in library sciences, and he's very, he gets AI, but he's also very aware of it, and he tells me all the time, ask it two or three times, are you sure?
yeah.
And I mean, even simple math will
Hmm.
elude AI for a
Right.
second,
Oh,
and you
yes,
would think that
right.
would be the simplest thing for a computer to handle. By the way, when you mentioned our science fiction worries, even before Terminator 2 and Skynet, do you remember that movie from 1970, Colossus, The Forbin Project? Okay, well, that's okay, but it was a supercomputer. Eric Braeden from Young and the Restless and Planet of the Apes movies makes this supercomputer. They use it for the Department of Defense to handle the nuclear missiles. and it became smarter and smarter. And then it
Huh.
talks to the Soviet equivalent, and they decide that humans cannot take care of themselves. And it's one of those great dystopian early 70s movies without a happy ending, and they take over the world. And at that the end, and it's like,
Right?
I love this
Yep.
movie. And I'm like, somebody's got to remake this movie for now. But then it occurred to me, it takes 2 years at least from script to final making a
Mm.
movie.
Oh, and we'll be
How,
that much further ahead, right?
exactly. Whatever
Yeah.
AI is in 2 years is going to be different. I mean, literally, I've seen it in the last year or two, how much
Mm-hmm.
smarter it is
Mm-hmm.
now than it
Mm-hmm.
was 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And it's frightening, but again, these computers are, it keeps gathering information. And the art side of the AI thing really is, I can appreciate the artists that are frustrated that it will take an amalgam of styles and generate something new, and that is
And
lousy.
I and that's stealing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
yeah, so
yeah.
yeah, no, no one wants that, I don't think, except of course for the soulless people who
Yeah, yeah,
profit from it.
yeah. Or again, but I also, my heart goes out to that person who's like, but I can't afford an artist, and I want to make comics. So
Yeah,
what do I do? And it's like, yeah, but that's still not cool. Find a partner and
yeah,
do it. I mean, this is where,
yeah,
like, no, man, Simon, meet Garfunkel and start making music.
yeah,
You
yeah.
know?
I mean, if the AI I don't know, learn to draw on its own, that would be a different thing. But that's not, I mean, these are tools that we program.
Yes.
We give them the information to do what we want. And if we feed in art that does not belong to us and then use it, that's wrong. That's just flat out wrong.
But it's not even people feeding it necessarily. It literally is just it's setting up and searching the internet randomly.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the thing. And again, I
Yeah.
mean, and I do think some of the companies are listening, although I forget if it was ChatGPT specifically, but one of the big AIs just cut that deal with Disney, and all of a sudden now like 300 characters are available to use to generate your own animation or
Wow.
images. And yeah, and Disney's like, yeah, all right. And
Wow.
again, yeah, so
And Disney, I mean, God, I'll
yeah,
they'll send a hitman out after me. But, in 1989, before Dark Horse,
uh-huh,
um, during the year when I was freelancing for Comico and Bob was losing his mind and we were in Southern California, which he hated, Disney offered me a job. They were just about to branch into making their own comics. They had licensed the work out to Dell Gold Key for years and years, and now they were going to have their own comics publishing.
yeah,
And they offered me job the job of, or well, no, they interviewed me for the job of editor-in-chief, and they offered me more money, John, than the numbers didn't even make sense to me. It was so much money.
wow,
And I, you know, I just, even though it was work for hire because Disney owns those characters, I really had to consider it because the money was so good. And Bob and I had nothing, and he really was going crazy. Um, but then I said, well, but what about the original art? What will happen to the original art? And they told me, well, no, the artist will not get that. We
right,
own all the original art. And I said,
yeah,
the interview is over. Thanks very much. Bye bye.
wow.
Because that was a deal breaker for me,
I
you
get it,
know?
buddy. Art Baltazar was doing a couple characters for Disney Adventures, the magazine, and this one that was adorable, Gorilla. And to this day, he can't get it back because, of course, it's Disney. It's Disney
Yeah,
property, and they're never going to
yeah,
do anything with it. It's just a
yeah.
little, 8-page thing that was in the magazine and everything.
They'll shred it.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, I know. It's
insane,
horrifying.
insane. Yeah, I get
Mhm.
it. Crazy. Well, we can wrap,
Immoral.
buddy, if you want. I mean, it's
I
close to dinner time for you.
yeah, I probably I have some work I should do.
All right,
Uh,
fair enough. I mean, and again, this doesn't have to be the last conversation that we have, of course.
Good, good.
So yeah, when honestly, when this new book, hold it up again for everyone to kind of keep their eyes out for the Tintin.
Oh, yeah. All right. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Will be published by Slingsby Brothers in 2027, though
Okay.
I believe it's going to be solicited through the Fantagraphics uh, order solicitation. So,
Okay.
uh,
Regardless, I'm going to bug you for their information because I'd love to hear about the British things that they made as well.
yeah, I don't have
Oh, it's
my
okay.
props. I don't have all my
That's all
props
right.
handy. Or I could show you those big, beautiful books. This I happen to have on the desk because I'm actively working on it. In fact,
Sure.
that's what I really need to do. I have my
Well, I have to
daily
transcribe.
quota to reach. Yeah, and you
I have to
have,
transcribe a Mark Miller
oh,
interview this
see,
weekend, so I hear you,
but
buddy.
if you can get AI to transcribe for you, I think that's a perfectly legit use of that
I
tool.
agree. I agree. It's
Uh,
a tool.
yeah,
And I don't feel bad in that capacity
yeah.
helping me. And I still will go over it and fine tune it. And I mean, even you've been lovely asking me about my bullshit within this conversation. But when I do transcribe our talk, I will focus on the Diana Schutz portion of the
Uh,
conversation.
well,
So
yeah, but you don't have to cut you out. I don't, I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
well, I do think.
Just be careful, if the AI tells you, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that, then
Absolutely, 2001, everybody.
yeah.
If you don't recognize the quote, classic. No, honestly, I think for the book, and truly as an editor, I want your feedback, and I'll bug you more. I will ask you maybe to kind of go through the book if you'd ever have time. Forgive me for asking on the air, but no, honestly, I do want my friends.
I'd like to read it.
Oh,
Yeah.
that'd be lovely, buddy. But honestly, I am considering maybe between chapters putting little essays in because I did it. I have had
Oh,
an
that'd be
interesting journey.
fun.
You
Yeah,
know,
that'd be great. That's a
30
good idea.
30 years in Chicago broadcasting,
Yeah.
covering boxing for 20 years in print. So my little adventures in media beyond what I do with the podcast and everything. So yeah, I'll probably do that for the first book.
Yeah, no, in fact, as an editor, I'm going to say I think that's a great idea because, books of interviews are, yeah, all and sundry. You can find those.
Yeah,
There, but uh, personalizing it like that makes a big difference, I
that's
think.
cool.
So,
Also, I mean, again, I want people like yourself that have had these long careers, but I also think, and one of the things I want to put in the book, there's so many people of the last 25 years that haven't been covered. I loved
mhm.
those Titan books,
Yeah.
comic writers on Spider-Man, whatever
Oh,
that
yeah,
came out in
yeah,
those
right.
in the
Yep,
early
yep,
2000s,
yep.
and that's
Hmm.
part of the inspiration. And then also like the work that you guys did, like I said, your own Telegraph Wire, but also Amazing Heroes and Comics Interview, the other publications I mentioned, and it's like no, it is interesting, but I want like Kelly Sue and Rom V, who I think is
Hmm.
brilliant,
Hmm.
and Gail and others like that haven't had that treatment because we've read about the Silver Age and the Bronze Age people and stuff, and I
Hmm.
adore those people. But it's like, no, let me, let's like the new kids deserve. They're not kids, but those people. There you go.
Javier Rodriguez, please.
I haven't talked to him yet. I would love to, but
Yeah.
Dennis as well.
And
Dennis Kapp,
Dennis also, yeah,
who's writing the book and everything.
that and his assorted crisis events. I
Yes,
just read the latest issue, which is just a fantastic, like it's a whole take on McLeod's understanding comics. It's weird and yeah, it's great. It
I'm late to the Dennis party, but
defies description, but it's
yeah,
great.
I've been trying to get him to come on, and we'll continue to pursue him. But yeah, like the Mark Russells as well. You know,
Yes, yeah.
so yeah,
I
there's great new voices, and the Vita Ayalas, and I mean I don't want it to just be the boys club. So I really and also I do want people of color, and I'm really glad that it is a bigger world that these people are getting in and are able to show
yeah.
their their talents and
Yeah,
are
it
being
was,
recognized.
I mean, my first years in at the comic store, not even my first years, in the 80s at Comics and Comics in Berkeley, California, an incredibly open, liberal place. And I had male customers who would not bring their purchases to the counter if I was at the cash register because it was the girl and the good, right? So, I mean,
If anything, hey, let's talk to the girl that's in the comic store.
well, you'd think so, but no. And so, yeah, we're not that
Ridiculous.
far removed from that. But
Really,
I'm
you don't think so,
glad.
buddy? Honestly,
Well,
talk to
I'm
me, because truly,
I
this is
think
something that Kelly Sue and
no,
I.
thank God that there have been changes so that the industry is wider and is embracing more voices. Absolutely. Um, I
But
guess, well, but for me,
yeah,
I can remember. I
sure,
remember only too well when it wasn't that way at all.
that's fair.
And like, yeah, it didn't come soon enough. It hasn't come soon enough, and it's still got a long ways to go, I think.
Completely agree. Kel and I, and this is God, 2010, I think, when she first started doing Captain Marvel, and I'm like,
Hmm.
but Kel, it's getting better, isn't it? And God bless her, literally, because it was only audio, but I could hear that she had gritted teeth, and she's like, it's getting better, but nobody needs to sit down. There's still work to do. And I'm like,
That's right. That's right.
goddamn
Yeah.
right, lady. Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. I'm on your
Yeah.
side.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So she
Yeah.
killed.
No back patting just
Damn
yet.
right. No, nobody gets to sit down. There's still plenty of work to do. Absolutely. And also, how about the bullshit? Forgive me, but all the Comicsgate bullshit. I'll say it. I
Oh,
mean, what
yeah.
assholes? And I mean, it's like, isn't there enough room? By all means, do your books over there. That's great.
Right. Yeah.
That's fine. But don't
Read
shit
what
on the people that aren't, you
read
know,
what you want to
read what
read.
you want.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that fucking
Yeah.
simple.
I
Jesus
know.
Christ.
I know. It's so bizarre to me.
Yeah, fuck them. That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Their superheroes are somehow graven in gold and we can't touch them, I
No,
guess.
I didn't know. And actually, my friend was telling me this today that a lot of them are going to the pulps because there was a sexist white guy savior mentality back in the pulp days of the 30s and
Hmm.
40s. So that stuff, Robert Howard and Walter Gibson with the Shadow, and I forget the guy's name for Doc Savage, the original guy. But yeah,
Right.
so it's like, yeah, I guess. And I'll even admit, from a nostalgia standpoint, I like reading them. That's why I always bring it up that Rom V takes those pulpy ideas and puts them in modern
Hmm.
framing. Like
Yeah.
These Savage Shores is a great thing where a British vampire goes to Mumbai and thinks he's going to have a feeding fest with these backward natives, and the people of Mumbai kick the shit out of the guy because it's like, yeah, just because we're a different society does not mean we're stupid.
Yep.
And but it's weird, and it never
Yeah.
occurred to me. And I'm like, yeah, I guess I could kind of see them going to Lester Dent for Doc Savage and Walter Gibson for the Shadow and stuff, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I,
Whatever.
you know, I I mean, I grew up reading stories that were written by men, drawn by men, and I don't just mean comics, and
Yes.
and when I
Plus
began
television and film.
working, yes, and when I began working in this industry, I was working almost exclusively with men. Very few at Dark Horse, there was one other woman, and she didn't know a fucking thing about comics and didn't care. She was the receptionist. She answered the
Sure.
phone.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was so the only woman they had was a receptionist.
Crazy.
And you know, these that was 1990. That's not that far back.
I'm with you. Yeah.
Um, but now, like I'm reading Mimi Pond's uh, uh, newest graphic novel published by Drawn and Quarterly. It's called Do Admit, The Mitford Sisters and Me, and it is fantastic. I'm reading Arundhati Roy's memoir called Mother Mary Comes to Me. Um,
Huh.
One of my favorite cartoonists is a Canadian uh, woman who comes from the former Yugoslavia, um, uh, named Ivana Filipovic, and she and I can't I'm blanking on the name of her graphic novel, but it won a Canadian award a couple of years ago.
Cool.
She's up in Vancouver, BC. So I'm finally, John, getting to read female voices, which, read, hear, look at the art of the women, and this is new,
Yeah. Yeah, you're
really,
right.
this is not, it's, I mean, yeah, Kelly Sue was probably one of the first of
Yeah, you
the
could still kind of count them on both
mainstream
fingers or both hands. Yeah.
women writers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gail, obviously a little
Gail
before her.
as
But no,
well.
you're right.
Yeah.
No, that's fair. Honestly, like, and I'm glad that I've gotten to know Erica Schultz and Kelly Thompson from an editorial standpoint, Heather
Hmm.
Antos. So it's nice again. And yeah, I'm and Vita, I mentioned Vita Ayala earlier and everything. No, it is getting better. I'm glad, and I love the stack of names you just threw at me. So I'm gonna have to do some more investigating and then find out about these people.
Well, many of these women that I'm re like Carol Tyler, who was just inducted into the Eisner Hall of Fame. She's been around, as has Mimi Pond, really since the underground days,
Oh, cool.
sort of adjacent to the underground, I guess, and
Yeah.
that's where I first noticed their work. The kind of stuff being published by Fantagraphics or Drawn and Quarterly. Carol's been almost exclusively published by Fantagraphics, I think.
Okay.
And I've loved her work for decades now. Um, she's about my age, I think, and she's just a brilliant, brilliant artist. And the Mimi Pond book about the Mitford sisters is the best work she's ever done. It's just visually inventive and exciting, and I'm afraid my days of adventure comics are probably behind me, aside from Martian Manhunter.
Fair enough.
Um,
That's cool.
yeah, because I'm really digging Javier Rodriguez's art on that.
For you, is
And
it art first and story second, or does it matter? Or
well, yeah, that's tough to say. I think I'm more like you. I need story. Um, I need story. But
yeah.
if the art is terrible,
Oh,
the story, yeah,
yes. No, I agree. Again, this is
yeah,
where I do agree with Todd
yeah.
McFarlane. And yeah, no, bad art does make it hard to get through a book.
It really
It really
does.
does. Yeah.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and that's why I feel bad for some of the beginners that come to me with their books, and I feel like an asshole. And it's like, I got to be honest, man. I'm not feeling it from your book, and I'm not
Hmm.
saying stop. Come back to me when you've got something else.
Yeah.
But right now, no. I'm sorry. It's not it because really, I'm like, who the fuck am I? Whatever. But it's like I just gotta look. I gotta like the book. I don't do reviews. If you're on my show, I like your work. It's that basic. So
Hmm. Hmm. And everyone thinks that you're an overnight success, right? I mean, look at Brian. Wha- Between his work on Powers and then the Marvel work, his incredible run on Daredevil, which, my God, you're, you're getting a Daredevil book, and you're in the wake of Frank Miller and whoever, and Wally
yes,
Wood, for God's sakes, and you're gonna write Daredevil, and then he knocks it right out of the fucking park. It's brilliant.
but it
Um,
took him 10 years at Caliber and other places to kind
and
of figure
exactly
his shit
right.
out. Yeah,
But the readers at large sort of think, oh, overnight
this guy.
success.
Yeah,
And people don't realize that no, you have to kind of ply your trade. You have to you have to train, you have to work, and it takes a while to become an overnight success.
100%. Do you look at web comics at all, or anything that's happening now?
I can't, I really, I actively, and it's, yeah, I'm sure it's my age, but I actively dislike looking at comics on a screen.
Okay,
Yeah,
sure. No, that's
yeah,
fair. Come
yeah,
on, what the hell? You've had the habit of opening a book and
yeah,
everything. I respect that.
yeah,
I'll be honest, I like screens. I loved when the iPad happened. I was worried
yeah.
that the iPhone, I'm like, well, how are you going to do a splash page when your screen is no bigger than a baseball card?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
and then, thank God around 2010, it's like, hey, look, it's the iPad. And it's like,
Yeah,
okay. And I
yeah,
will admit, I mean, the colors, I mean, really, when they
yeah.
do it right,
Mm-hmm.
it really is spectacular looking on
Yeah,
that pad. I got to
yeah,
admit.
yeah.
So,
Well, yeah, I don't have an iPad, so there's one thing.
shocking.
And the my laptop, which
Yes.
I'm speaking to you on right
Yes.
now, is, that's a work, it's a work thing. I
I'm
didn't
doing the
grow
same,
up with
buddy.
it,
Yes.
and yeah, yeah, laptops equal work. And so um yeah, and I like, because I've made those books. I like, I want to feel the paper. I adore a freshly printed book because I like the smell of it. I do,
I
you
know. I
know.
I understand. I even like
So,
the old comics, and whenever like when they
oh,
start to
yeah,
age,
because of the acid in the paper starts, yeah, but it smells cool. It smells,
it's familiar.
oh, yeah,
Yes,
yeah, yeah,
absolutely. That's so funny.
yeah.
Oh my God. Well, good Lord, woman, we're going to talk for like 20 hours if I don't stop us now. But Diana, honestly, I can't thank you enough. You've always been kind to me, literally from I think our first conversation 20 goddamn years ago when you're
Wow,
talking
has it been
about,
that long?
yeah, when you were telling about how the second volume of Harlan Ellison's Dream Corridor, and Harlan Ellison's like, "Hey, what's a podcast? Where's this information coming from?" And he was angry at me for about 10 minutes, which is fantastic.
That's then you've joined the inner circle of Harlan Ellison, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I thank you for that. And truly, anytime I've asked you to come on, you have, and it really means a lot because I have tremendous respect for your work, your contributions. And by the way, everybody, Joe Shuster, Canadian Comic Hall of Fame inductee, and I'm very pleased about that, and rightfully so. But also,
And
all the women that
and
go
and
ahead, honey.
and Eisner Hall of
And
Fame.
Eisner Hall of Fame, I beg your pardon. And of course, part of the Eisner. What is the group that you
Oh,
oversee?
yeah, as of this year, I was asked to join the judges committee. So yeah, we spent 10 very intense Sundays figuring out who would be inducted into the Eisner Hall of Fame for 2026 and who would be on the voters list, which just went out today, I understand. So already I have people in my messenger going, "What the fuck? Why is this person on the list?" And anyway,
Yeah, typical.
but that's actually been really good. Not only am I sort of working with a tremendous group of comics historians and critics and educators who love the medium and know everything about it. Um, it- but it's a volunteer gig, and it's a way of giving back to the industry, giving my time to
Yeah.
comics, and also when Will died, Ann Eisner made me at his memorial service in New York. She said that she was worried about Will's legacy, and she made me promise, well, made me, it was easy to make the promise that I would do whatever I could to keep Will's legacy alive in comics. And this is, just another way of being able to do that. Um, so yeah, despite all the flack for our choice. That's okay. I don't mind. People
Are
can.
are are they in Portland? Because is it in Portland where they do like a week where they celebrate Eisner as well, or
And that's nationwide. Will
oh,
Eisner
okay.
Week
Is that
is
coming up in March or
it comes up usually the first week of March. It's sort of in conjunction with Will's birthday, which is March 6th, I believe.
okay?
Born March 6th, 1917. So somewhere the week around the 6th is Will Eisner Week promoting literacy, promoting comics, graphic novels, promoting reading, and not coincidentally promoting Will. And so yeah, we have a new museum here in Portland called the Northwest Museum of Cartoon Arts. There's going to be an Eisner exhibit. I'm going to docent. I'm going to be a docent for a night, taking people around the
Oh,
exhibit and
that's great.
talking about the art. Yeah, it'd be
Cool.
fun. Um, and Brian and David in their comics writing class always do a
Dave
they
Walker,
always do a
everybody.
thing. Yeah,
Yeah.
they always do a thing for Will Eisner Week. So I think this year they have Stephen Weiner and Dan, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Mazur or Mazur. They just did Will Eisner, a comics biography, graphic novel published
Oh,
by
nice.
NBM, and it's great. This came out last year, actually, but I won't be surprised if it walks away with at least one Eisner Award in the summer because it's fantastic. I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know about Will, but even I learned some stuff reading that, and it's beautifully drawn. It's non-judgmental. It's loving and kind, and it's everything that Will was. So it's yeah, another great book. We are we're we're living in a time of great wealth when it comes to comics and what
Indeed.
there is for us to read. Yeah.
And I'm glad that people like that and Tom Scioli, what he's done with his
Yeah.
graphic novel biographies, and that again the correct story is being told.
Yeah.
So I was very lucky. I years before the podcast at the University of Chicago, they had a humanities weekend where Eisner was there and Scott McCloud was there,
Oh,
and
fantastic.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I did get to
Will
speak to him.
and Will and Scott they were close. They were really close.
That's
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
That's really cool. No, I feel very fortunate. I had a couple of those Warren Spirit reprints
Oh, cool.
and that I brought to have him sign and everything.
That's
He's like,
so
oh, these are
nice. Yeah.
great. And he goes, you're still
Yeah.
reading these? I'm like, yeah. you know, yeah, you're that
Yeah.
good, Will. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to get
He was
Saviak
that
back.
good.
Beg your pardon, say that again.
He really was that good. I mean, in the
Yeah,
40s, when they were just learning how to handle the page, they were all used to newspaper strips and suddenly they had the
the nine
sort of
panel
the
grid. Yeah,
yeah, they had the geography, the topography of an entire page to play with, and but they were still treating it like a single strip. So,
sure.
you'd have rows of like mid shot, mid shot, mid shot. And only Will was varying the size of the panels and moving the camera around to, give down shots, up shots, the
Oh yeah.
whole, yeah. And yeah, he was that good. He really was that good.
No, it's pretty amazing. Pretty.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to. I think I'll bug Saviak because he finished that last escapist story, as you likely know.
Yeah. Well, I know that he worked with Will on it. And yeah, it was the last story Will did before he died.
Yeah. Yeah.
He sent it off FedEx and took himself to the hospital.
Wow.
He told me from the hospital, or sent it off FedEx, went to the doctor, had postponed going to see his doc, and the doc said, "Get your ass to the hospital right now." And so, yeah, I last spoke to him the night before he went in for the heart surgery that eventually killed him in there. So, from which he did not recover, sadly. Yeah.
No, it was real. I wish I was there when he would be at the Eisner Awards and literally hand out the awards to
He
people.
did. And, he stood for that whole ceremony, John. I mean, this is like, I'm 71. I couldn't do that. And he was, like, his last year there, he was 86 or 87,
Wow.
87. And he stood for that one year. Jeff Smith and someone else, I don't remember, bought him a fucking throne, like this big chair. It was like a throne, and they brought it up on stage so that he could sit. But he couldn't sit. He felt like an asshole sitting. So the throne was dispensed with, and he continued to stand for the
That's
entire
excellent.
ceremony.
And I had like at least a dozen friends who, when they were breaking in, would show their books to Will and got constructive criticism and
He was
encouragement. You know,
the
pretty
in
cool.
in 2000, yeah, fall of 2000. Uh, he was the keynote speaker at Small Press Expo in Bethesda, Maryland.
Sure.
And so they brought him there. I flew out there for the show. And the Saturday of the show, I took him around the artist room and, Small Press Expo, that's what it was. Small press, literally people with their mini comics and,
Zines. Yeah.
no retailers in the room, no big publishing outfits in the room, all comics, all artists. And we went from one table to the next. And because I love that stuff, I would say, Will, this is so and so, and here's his work. And introduced him all around the room to young artists. And they were like flipping out that they were getting to meet Will Eisner. Will was flipping out because he was seeing work that was new and fresh and exciting to him.
Wow.
And that night after I guess it was the Ignatz Awards, and he'd
Oh,
given his
crazy. Yeah.
speech and blah blah, and then it was good night, and he was leaving the next morning. We were saying good night, and he thanked me for having taken him around the room like that. He said he was so energized by everything he'd seen. He just, he couldn't wait to get back to the drawing board himself to like compete with all these young
Isn't that
groups,
great?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was really,
Ah,
yeah, right to the end, he was completely in love with the form, and if you were doing it, if you were involved with comics at all, he loved you. I mean, it was really that simple. He treated everyone. Yeah, yeah,
that's amazing. That's amazing. All right,
yeah.
buddy. I'm gonna let you.
Howard
Oh,
Chaykin has other stories to tell about Will.
I
So
know.
if
I
you
know.
speak to
That-
Howard,
oh, I do.
you can get the other side of
I
that.
understand. That's okay. That's a big enough comic book world. Nobody, and everyone doesn't
That's
have to
right.
be friends. That's okay. And
But
I will confess, I do enjoy my conversations with Howard.
yeah, I
They're
love
always spirited.
Howard. I love Howard, and I loved Will. So
Yeah.
there's room for all of it.
Yeah, no, I'm always sad when my friends don't like each other. Not that I was friends with Will, but again, I'd like to think that Howard and I have a reasonable acquaintanceship in these 20 years. But yeah, and I have other friends in the business that don't like each other, and it's like, all right, I understand. It's like
Yeah.
it's not going to affect my friendship with everybody, but what are you going to do?
Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
My friend, you were amazing tonight, and I really thank you so much. And this is going to be on the audio side, at least 3 episodes.
Oh my God.
So I'll start putting them out for you. And on the video side, I'm going to do a little work. I'm going to try. I'll try and insert some of the images, and certainly, especially the Telegraph Wire stuff, because I just love how it looks and the fact that you were able to talk to these people when you did. I think that's pretty cool, and I feel a kinship to what I do with what you were doing back then.
Absolutely. Except that you're far more professional than I ever
Whatever,
was.
whatever.
But I've had a blast, John. Thank
Oh,
you
that
so
means a lot,
much.
buddy. Well, good.
Let's
I'm good. I
let's
don't
let's
feel.
let's not wait
All right. No, of course not. And absolutely. And
I'm
no,
I'm
not
running
anyway.
out of time, dude, so
Oh, no, stop that. And I understand. And no, I know the clock's running. It's, buddy, we're not old. We're just not young anymore.
that's
That's what I
right.
keep telling my sister. It's like, no, 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 we're just not young anymore. And
It's
no,
not young.
Mark Schultz and I and Rick Remender were in a green room, and he's like, I want to do this, I want to do that, and before I can't anymore. And Remender very sweetly is like, hey man, no, you still got it. And I'm like, no, no, no. His point is that we know the clock's running.
Yeah.
So fear not. We will continue this conversation, and I'll bug you off the air. I'm sure in subsequent days to get some of these people that you've mentioned at the end of the conversation that I should probably contact and have word
Oh,
balloons with.
that'd be great.
That'd be
Yeah.
excellent. All right, buddy.
Okay.
Out here, I'm going to stop it here, and
Okay.
but we'll talk still for a moment. But I will thank you on the air for talking to me today.
My great pleasure. Thank you for having me.